The world of One Piece is governed by fate, Hokage, and the will of D. But what happens when an anomaly is thrown into the mix? An orphan from another world, carrying a power that defies the laws of devil fruits. Growing up alongside Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, Naruto Uzumaki was never just another lost kid. He was a wild card that the world government never saw coming. From hunting boars in the Grey Terminal to facing the crushing weight of absolute justice, this is the complete saga of Naruto's life on the Grand Line. Will his presence be enough to save his brothers from the tragedies of the future? Let's find out. Thump, 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 thump. His heart was beating loudly in his ears and the blood seemed to be rushing to his head as the temperature seemed to rise drastically. His head lolling forwards for a second before snapping back up as he kept his eyes on the prize, his first prey of the week, heck, the only prey of the week. He braced his feet against the branch. Then with a tremendous release of tension, he pounced on the innocent boar beneath him, only for the boar to run away at a loud noise, just as a group of 3 kids entered the clearing, one with a dirty straw hat, another with a mangled top hat, and the final one, most likely the leader, had no hat, but scruffy black hair. He couldn't stop himself as he bowled the strafoot over, the other 2 jumping back in surprise at the sudden appearance of an enemy. "Sorry, I was aiming for that boar you scared away with your loud noises," was his gruff apology, pushing himself to his feet as he left the strafoot sprawled on the floor. Walking a short distance away, he turned to face the trio. "Yep, 25 feet, I can work with this. The strafoot doesn't look like much, and Top Hat doesn't look like the brawler type. It's black hair that I need to watch out for," he thought as Top Hat helped strafoot to his feet. "And what were you planning on killing it with, your bare hands?" Black Hair asked, his arms crossed in a defensive stance, strafoot smiling as if we were best friends. "Well, if you must know," he started, bending at the knee to pull my weapon free from my boot, rising with a small dagger in hand. The blade portion shining brightly, not a speck of blood to tarnish it, a darn shame. Flipping the dagger between his fingers, strafoot seemed to lose any remaining tension as he stuck his hand out. "Hey, my name is Luffy, do you want to be my friend?" "Luffy, what have I told you about asking random strangers to be your friend? For all we know, he could be a member of Blue Jam's crew." Black Hair admonished as strafoot sulked, looking bewildered. But Ace, he couldn't be much older than you, and besides, if he was a Blue Jam pirate, wouldn't he have already tried to kill us?" Luffy asked, his tone low, just in case this earned him yet another disciplined lesson. "Luffy has a point, Ace, and besides, who cares, there's another kid in the forest to join our crew, now we have 4. Top Hat said, his tone excited as Ace seemed to deflate some more, that is, until the boy cut them off. "Wait a minute, who said I want to be your friend? A crybaby strafoot, a excitable Top Hat, and a rude Black Hair, you 3 go together perfectly, because no one else would want you. My name is, well, my name isn't important, what is important is that I get some lunch, which you so loudly interrupted." The boy shouted as he turned on his heel, running into the forest. "You think we should go after him, Ace?" Top Hat asked as Ace nodded, the trip perking up. Luffy cracked his knuckles, and Top Hat smirked, while Ace held his grim look before his face split in a wide grin. "Of course, I want to beat the crap out of him, Sabo, no one snubs Portgas D. Ace and gets away with it, catch that midget," Ace said, leading the group as they broke out into a run. Pulling a staff out of nowhere, Ace smashed the tree as they passed, leaving a deep indent in the trunk. Meanwhile, the boy ran through the forest, using his dagger to cut any offending brush out of the way. Suddenly, he took a sharp right, swinging his blade at a seemingly unimportant vine, severing the hanging green appendage, however. As the 2 halves separated, a large piece of the tree in front of the boy fell down like a drawbridge, the boy sprinting up the wood before grabbing yet another vine, hauling the wood back up. Closing the opening. Now safe inside his personal fortress, the boy began climbing up the inside, heading for a small opening higher up which opened out onto an overhanging branch. Sitting low on the branch, his body submerged in shadows, he saw Ace, Luffy, and Sabo run underneath him, not noticing him. Snickering, he jumped down, running off into the forest to try and solve his hunting trip by catching something, anything. After a short while, the sun was beginning to set, and his arms were still empty, his stomach long since announced its displeasure with the current conditions. The boy was starting to lose his temper, yelling at his gut to shut the heck up, until he heard a rustling in the bushes. He raised his nose to the air and took 3 short sniffs. I know that smell, it's cow. And by the sounds, it's a big one too. Oh, thank you, oh higher entity than I, for supplying me with sustenance today. The boy said, keeping his voice to a quiet whisper so as not to scare away his only potential meal. Holding his dagger to the side, he ran at the bushes, jumping over them to land on the cow and slit its throat without any trouble, except it wasn't a cow. Well, there was a cow. It was just clutched in the jaws of a truly massive spider that easily matched a ship in size. Letting loose a girlish scream, the boy turned tail and took off running, raising hell all through the forest as the spider finished its meal, and gave chase. After all, what creature passes up a free meal? The boy used every bit of his memory of the forest to try and escape, but it seemed the spider had traversed even bigger distances than him, since it always seemed to be on his tail. In fact, the only reasons he wasn't currently encased in silk was because its size prevented it from following him directly. Instead, running across the treetops as it shot long, sticky streams of silk at his fleeing boy. Diving forwards to dodge another shot, he went over a cliff, rolling the side into a clearing surrounded by rock, not too high to climb out, but too high to do so quickly. The spider seemed to realize this as it dove off the side after him, using its string to wrap down the side before landing with a mighty whump. The boy inhaled deeply, his fear taking over as he pointed the puny in comparison dagger at the giant arachnid, vaguely noting that the dagger was about the size of the spider's pupils. Gathering what little courage he had left, the boy focused on his enemy, intending to go down fighting. After all, he would die either way, at least this way would be remembered as the one who tried to kill Mr. Fearsome. The spider decided to start things off with a shot, which the boy swatted aside, the string sticking to a boulder as the spider swung it around, forcing the boy to duck under the massive rock. Taking a deep breath, the boy charged the spider, dodging to the side of 2 more shots before tripping on a patch covered a 3rd shot, holding him in place before he cut himself free. But not before being knocked away by the spider. H's back exploded in white-hot pain against the rough stones, several stabbing into his back which didn't have more protection than a thin cloth shirt. Feeling the warmth, he felt where the wounds were and traced the bloody lines clawed into his back. Pushing himself up, he swung at a swinging leg, the blade barely entering the tough skin as it threw him back against the wall, pinning him as the sharp hairs on the leg pierced his skin, more blood joining the growing pool on the floor as he sawed at the leg. Finally managing to sever the tip before he fell to the ground, promptly followed by a heavy weight lancing through his shoulder as another leg sunk in, then a fang as venom flooded his system. He tried to scream louder, only for his body to lack much needed oxygen as the leg began crushing his lungs. Accepting his fate, he closed his eyes, his final breath leaving his body, until he heard a cry of, "Gomu Gomu no pistol," followed by the fang sinking deeper before falling back as the spider switched targets, attacking Luffy, for it was his voice the boy heard shouting the attack. What followed, he attributed to the venom wreaking havoc in his veins. He saw Luffy's arms stretch out, followed by Ace swinging down the cliffside, his trusty pole catching on branches and handholds, allowing him to slowly descend. Sabo didn't seem to have that luxury as he was the first victim, a stray shot of string catching his left elbow, pulling him off the cliff as he plummeted, Luffy jumping after him to catch him. The boy forced his arm to move, a futile gesture to tell them to go away and save themselves. Seeing that it didn't work, he tried words, only for a dry, racking cough to erupt from his throat as oxygen lead the charge down his windpipe, furiously integrating itself in his body as he spit, licked his lips and tried once again for words. "Go away, run for your lives." The boy gasped out, his voice barely reaching his own ears, much less theirs, especially over the ensuing fight noises. Pushing himself to his feet, he lifts an arm, only for his bitten shoulder to erupt in white pain, sending the boy back to the ground. "Dang it," he hissed through clenched teeth, rising once again. "Give me the power, so I won't be a burden ever again, so that I won't have to be saved. Give me the power to be the one who saves." The boy yelled as he forced his legs to move, slowly at first until he gathered speed, running headlong at the fight, his treasured dagger clutched tightly in his right hand. Stumbling more than swerving, he weaved past the shots of string as he swung the small blade with every ounce of his strength left, digging into and slicing off a leg as he went with the momentum and tumbled to the ground, barely avoiding a falling hairy leg. Looking up, he saw Ace slam his pipe into the head of the spider, green slime spouting out, coating the cliffside in goo. As Luffy wrapped his arms around the legs, pulling the together and tripping the spider as it fell, Sabo descending like a vulture as he kicked its eyes, the spider letting out a muffled roar as it broke free. Shooting a line of string to a tree on the cliff top, pulling itself up and away from danger even as the three boys pelted it with rocks. The boy tried to smile, until his vision went dark and the ground met his head. His eyes fluttered open to see three faces over his, Luffy, Sabo, and Ace, one worried, one happy, and one stern, respectively. Seeing he was awake, Ace offered his hand to help the boy to his feet. The boy choosing to sit on the edge of the makeshift bed he found himself laying on. "Where am I?" the boy asked, running a hand through his messy yellow hair. He blinked a few times to clear his vision. Although it didn't help at all, and when he exhaled, his breath rotted his eyebrows. "Oh, you're at Aiden's. Don't worry, she's nice, she'll take care of you and make sure you don't die," Luffy said, before Ace planted his fist in Luffy's head. "Don't just answer something when asked, just ignore them or ask something before answering," Ace yelled, as Sabo watched his two brothers fighting yet again. "Honestly, dying is the least of my worries, I just need to get back to my home in the forest," the boy said, the two fighting brothers ignoring or not hearing him. Sabo however did. And answered in place of Luffy. "Oh, you have a home in the forest too, huh? If you tell me where it is, I'll carry you back while these two sort out their problems," Sabo said, extending his hand to the boy. "Afraid I can't do that, a pirate has to have his secrets after all, you might be a government spy," the boy said, giving a small smile to show that he was teasing. Oh, you hear that guys? Wild boy over here is going to be a pirate too," Sabo said excitedly, the statement making both brawlers freeze, Luffy pulling Ace's hair while Ace force-fed Luffy his hat. "Really? Then, maybe you could be our friend, after all, we did fight together, that's the first step to being friends," Luffy said, also extending his hand, the other one still holding Ace's hair. "Wait, we have to put it to a vote, Ace, how do you plead?" Luffy added, letting the black-haired boy as he rose as well. "It's vote, you idiot, and I suppose we could let him in, as long as he says I'm stronger than him," Ace said, raising his hand like he was going to punch Luffy, only for the boy to grab his fist, surprising Sabo and Luffy, angering Ace. "Never, a pirate has no better than himself. And no shipmate is lower than any other, that is my number one rule as a pirate," the boy said, throwing a punch back, which Ace caught effortlessly, his anger lightening at the words. "And a good rule it is. If you had admitted defeat that easily, I would have never accepted you as a member of my crew." "Welcome to the club," Ace said, actually smiling as he said the words. "Your crew. If I'm going to serve under anyone, it's Strafut over here, he seems like the most fun to be around," the boy said, pointing a thumb at Luffy, who blushed and hid behind his hat, speechless for once. "Just don't ask me how I know that when he can't even accept a compliment, skewed as it was," he added, tilting his head, and smiling good-naturedly. "I vote yes, I want him for my crew," Sabo added, Luffy shoving his friend as everyone turned to Luffy. "Well, Strafut, I don't have all day. Tell you what, if you vote yes, I'll give you a present," the boy said coaxingly. "Fine, yes, I vote yes," Luffy said before adding, "Now where's my gift?" making everyone break out in laughs as the boy climbed to the window, jumping out as he headed for the forest and his home tree. Vaguely hearing three echoes behind him, the boy ran to his tree, opening the door the manual way. Entering the room, he looked around before finding what he was looking for. Grabbing it, he exited the tree, making sure to lock it after himself. Seeing the three boys outside, he tossed the object to Luffy who caught it. It was a slightly larger version the boy's dagger. Luffy held it up by the tip. "Here Ace, you can have it. I have a punch as strong as a pistol, I don't need a blade to win a fight," Luffy said, handing the gift to Ace, who shrugged before pocketing the knife. "Now then, we have a drink," To welcome our new brother to the crew. Sabo cheered, the two other mirroring him. Pulling a bottle of alcohol, and 4 saucers from nowhere, Sabo poured everyone a drink before they all toasted the cups. Gulping the burning liquid down in one gulp. Now then, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is, well, you can call me Foxy. Foxy said, smiling before leaning back to avoid 3 time swings that would have sent him back into unconsciousness. Fine, name's Naruto, don't like, well guess what, you can take your opinions and shove them up your pretentious butts, kids nowadays. Naruto said, looking up into the sky. Well, there you have it, so let me know what you think. Also, did you like my mass upload for my stories? If things work out right, I may do that again for New Year's, anyways. I don't have much to say other than, please bear with my choices soon, since it was hard for me to try and work them out. Also, the idea of a Naruto growing up with Luffy and Ace, but joins the Marines is in my head. That won't happen this time, maybe another one is needed. Since I'm about 80 words short of 3,000, I'm going to keep talking so as to keep it even, okay. Also, I've made a general outline up to Logatown. So after that, it may take a little longer to get done, but just bear with it. I have a start to Naruto's pirate crew, and so far have only 4 OCs to 3 canon, including Naruto. Drip, drip, drip. The tears echoed hollowly on the pale stone, the salty fluid filling in the engraving etched into it. Here lies Sabo, who gave his life for his dream, may he find the treasure of the afterlife plentiful. Why Sabo, why'd you have to go and do something stupid like that? I thought we had a vow, we would all accomplish our dreams, and you go and get yourself killed. Naruto's voice broke, the last portion coming out in a fractured croak. Although, it isn't entirely your fault, the stupid saint just happened to see you flying a pirate flag, not even a recognized one at that. But we know why he killed you, it's because it fitted his desires. Naruto spat out with as much as venom as he could. Well, we'll show them, even if it means giving up my dream. I will avenge you, my fallen brother in arms. And I'm sure Luffy and Ace feels the same. The boy added, eyes smiling as more tears rolled down his cheeks. Oh yeah, Ace left on his adventure 1 year ago today. Guess that means I should get going, after all, I can't let Ace show me up, that just wouldn't do. You think you could do me a favor, watch over Luffy, after all, I can't very well guard him forever. He needs to spread his wings and lose a few feathers. Naruto said, rising from his sitting position, walking the short distance to the cliff, viewing the ocean way down below. Turning back, he saw Sabo's grave. Further back, he saw the rotting body of Mr. Aragog, that giant spider from so long ago. He was the reason Naruto could save Sabo, he was detained trying to kill the big creep. Naruto gave a small shiver. Spider were not his thing. Cursing the massive arachnid's very existence, he turned and jumped over the edge, falling towards the ocean, before a pair of arms shot out and caught him, keeping him from falling to his death. Thanks Luffy, I would prefer it if I didn't end up as a stain on the bottom of a mountainside. Naruto commented offhand as his younger brother wrapped him with his hands. Using his devil fruit abilities to fully wrap up Naruto, hugging every inch of him, refusing to let him go. Don't worry Luffy, I swear this is why Ace left in the middle of the night. Just so he wouldn't have to deal with the Gomu Gomu no hug of death. Naruto said, somehow managing to slide between Luffy's arms, and stand across from him, pushing the tip of his straw hat down to block his vision. Running past him towards the coastline, where a boat was docked. Goodbye Luffy, I promise to see you again in 2 years. Naruto shouted as he leapt over the side, running due the side of the mountain as Luffy tried to catch him before he left. If that's the best you can do, I don't know why I agreed to be your nakama. Naruto taunted, front flipping over a swinging arm by Luffy that clipped his foot, tripping him as he grabbed a branch to steady himself. But, I don't want to be alone, I need some friends or I'll go crazy and name some Cannonball Woodrow. Luffy said. Naruto would have been confused except this was perfectly normal on the list of things that only Luffy would say. Howling with laughter as the brothers raced down the mountain, one trying desperately. Why to catch his older brother by 3 years? Well, you certainly aren't doing a good job of keeping me around, are you, Strafut? Naruto shouted back, snickering as Luffy leapt at his brother, Compel. easily missing him as he moved to the side to avoid a tree, which Luffy collided with. Now laughing uproariously, Naruto missed the root that had grown up, which clotheslined him, making the male flip, rolling down the mountain like a ball before he managed to stop himself. Gripping the handhold on the side of a cliff, he hauled himself up, resting on the edge until a wind blew, causing him to teeter precariously on the edge as he saw Luffy running at him. Coming up with a quick plan, he leaned backwards, tumbling over the edge towards the beach, which was significantly closer now. He had fell about halfway down when a pair of hands appeared next to him, grabbing his arm as he continued falling, slowing down as he approached the bottom. Finally stopping about 25 feet above the ground, he turned his head and sunk his sharp canines into Luffy's hand, as he gave a loud cry and released Naruto, who fell to the ground, landing with a wince as he landed wrong, but still, he landed. He looked up to gesture at Luffy, only to see the boy falling off, apparently not giving up the chase that easy. Shrieking with a loud cry, Naruto pushed himself to his feet, taking of running for the beach once again as Luffy landed behind him with nary a cry of pain as his rubbery body absorbed the impact, although he left a deep crater from his impact. Climbing out of said crater, Luffy saw Naruto racing for the beach, where a small dinghy lay moored to an outstretching pier, Naruto's only escape. Crying out, he rose from the hole, then threw his arms at two trees, where he stretched backwards, aiming for Naruto, who had almost reached the boat. Breathing heavily, Luffy let loose, flying after and at Naruto, crashing into his back as the pair rolled end over end towards the boat, both stopping on the edge of the pier on their tiptoes as they hovered over the ocean. Regaining his balance, Naruto grabbed Luffy in a judo throw as he sent Luffy flying back into the forest, the younger boy giving a cry as he flew away. Jumping into his boat, he turned to see Luffy racing at him, only to skid to a stop as Naruto severed the line holding him back, shoving off with his foot as the distance increased between him and land. Luffy may want to catch his brother and stop him from leaving, but he couldn't stop him now, at least not without sending both of them into the ocean. Bye Luffy. Don't worry, I'll make sure come back to you. And then, I'll beat you up again, just like old times. Naruto shouted as he drifted away from his, Luffy's, Ace's, and Sabo's home island and Fuchsia village. You better. I have to get past you to reach the One Piece, so prepare yourself for a beating, midget. Luffy shouted back, waving as Naruto hurled insults in return for the jab at his height. It wasn't high's fault that food in the forest wasn't plentiful. Turning back and sitting down with a huff, Naruto closed his eyes as he drifted along, before it occurred to him that he didn't bring any survival supplies. How very Luffy of him. Sitting up like a shot, he grabbed at something, his fingers wrapping around a fishing pole and tackle box. Ah, Dayton, always thinking of her, children. I'm going to miss her. I probably should have told her goodbye, but I just can't say goodbye to another person like that. After all, it's like Ace said, goodbye is just another way of saying, I'll never see you again, an end to the adventure. A burning bridge, a cannonball fired at a sinking ship. Naruto mumbled to himself as he cast out his line, trying to catch some fish for lunch as his stomach grumbled loudly. 3 weeks later, Naruto gave a great yawn as he looked at his diminishing pile of fish. Great, just what I need, add starvation to the list of ways to die on the high seas. Naruto thought, Hi's inner voice sounding an awful lot like a scolding mother. As he reached for his fishing pole, he remembered why he had stopped fishing. His amount of bait had slowly dwindled down before running out about a week ago, which was longer than he thought it would last. Raising his head to the heavens, he cried out in a loud voice, come on. Give me some food, or at least an island where I can restock. Lowering his upraised head, Naruto looked around and seeing nothing, returned to staring at the drifting clouds. Jerk! Naruto yelled, whipping his pole around, the hook swinging dangerously close to Naruto's exposed flesh. A fact that he was reminded of as it swung upwards and across his cheeks, leaving 2 matching marks across his cheeks. Ah, that hurt! Naruto screamed, his arm swinging wildly as he cried in pain as the hook did another lap, slicing into his cheeks about a half-inch below the last set. Naruto screeched even higher as the bloody hook swung around again, this time Bine G stopped by Naruto's hand as he grabbed the line. Hurling the offending pole down, he glared over the edge into the rippling blue ocean water, his reflection glaring back, 2 sets of marks cut into his cheeks. The ruddy blood dripping into the water, causing a slight red ripple to interrupt Naruto's reflection. Looking up, he saw a black shape on the horizon, and squinting his eyes, he distinguished it to be an island. A port of safety in the wild and tormenting world, eh? It's a marine base, Naruto said grimly, his depression returning full force. Well, I suppose that shouldn't matter, I mean sure I want to be a pirate. But until I'm a recognized one with a bounty, the Marines shouldn't bother me, and therefore, a marine base is just that. A marine base. Naruto psyched himself up steadily. His depressive mood slowly dissipating. With that in his mind, Naruto slowly drew closer to the island, until he finally landed, the wannabe pirate leaping out with a great cry and kissing the ground. Then spitting out the sand that had collected in his mouth. Still he smiled, his happiness spreading to the surveying citizens as they guessed at their new arrival. Maybe he escaped from pirates. One whispered to her husband, who mumbled back, doubtful, a pirate ship could have easily caught that little wooden plank. Think he's here to sign up for the Marines? Or is he one of them chill, deep pirates that seem to be all over the place nowadays? One elder asked as he passed by in his carriage. What does it matter, he won't last either way if he finds him. A younger woman exclaimed from across the tiny carriage. The man's daughter most likely. Too true dear, too true indeed. The elder replied, pulling the curtains shut. Ah, land sweet land, how I've missed you my most beloved. Naruto cried out, before turning to view the ocean. But you could never hold the lure and mystery of my most precious ocean. Naruto added, the ocean calming for a split second before resuming its normal act. Turning back to the town where he had landed, he looked around, trying to find something before he spotted it, rushing off, leaving his boat as it began drifting back out to sea. But Naruto neither noticed nor cared at this point as he disappeared over a ridge, before reappearing heading straight for a uniform building with no outlying features to distinguish it from the other 15 or so buildings surrounding it. Yet it was exactly what Naruto was looking for. He threw the door open, practically teleporting across the busy room to plop down on a wooden stool, a man perched next to him nursing his drink. As he sat down, the doors shut behind him, the words, Lost Island Bar, come lost and leave drunk. Ordering a drink, Naruto turned to the side to see his companion in drinking. A tall man that probably towered over Naruto's 5 feet 10 inches frame by at least a half foot. A thick head of gray hair seemed to go in every direction, before he ran a hand over it, smoothing the mess to a clean sheen. The hair hanging down to the peak of his spine. His eyes, even blurred by drink, seemed to shift around as if looking for someone or something to kill, so this man had seen battle before, many times possibly. His mouth was currently occupied sipping the tall mug of frothy liquor that seemed so prevalent in bars. Threw over his shoulders, as if a last-second addition to his clothes was. A once white cloak now dyed a endless black, with the letters on the back switched to white to reverse the color scheme. Looking closely at the words, Naruto saw they read, Justice, so this man was a Marine. And at least a captain if the aura of strength permeating from him was any indication. Leaning back, passing the motion off his stretching, Naruto looked at the next stool over, only to find he next 3 stools occupied by a massive scythe, a handle wrapped in steel chains, with the handle being steel, the blade made of the same material. Don't you know that it's not nice to stare at a man's weapon? Even if it is the most magnificent one in existence. A deep baritone voice asked, his words surprisingly not slurred from the alcohol. Looking at the man, Naruto saw he had a wide grin on his face. One hand holding the mug as he upturned it, draining the contents in one swig. His other hand was extended to Naruto, an offer of introduction maybe. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto grasped his hand, gripping with as much strength as he could, which was normally enough to crush a wooden 2x4 to splinters. In comparison to his older brother, it paled in comparison, but compared to normal people, it was enough to engrave him in their mind, even one as inebriated as this one. The man didn't show any signs of pain, and his hand didn't buckle like most people's. Scratch the captain detail, read Commodore. Yep, definitely not someone you wanted fighting against you. So, judging from the coat, I take it you're a Marine, at least a Commodore, I would say. Naruto said, keeping his voice low, no need to set the man off. Best to keep a weaker position and keep his head attached. Nope, I used ta, be, but after that, I went rogue, today actually, or was it last week? I don't know anymore. The days seem to bleed together when the good stuff is flowing. You know the feeling, I'm sure, but then again, you seem a bit young to be drinking stuff quite that strong. The man answered, his tone slowly turning self-righteous. Hey, I'm 18 years old, unlike you grandpa. Naruto retorted, anger twisting his words to say, shut your trap, old man. He hated when someone mentioned his stature problem. Even worse when someone treated him like he was a kid. I promise, you look older than Garpu. Naruto added for good measure, fully intending to get back at this guy until his drink arrived and he picked it up. Downing half the bottle in 3 big gulps. It's silver, you color-blind pipsqueak. Now keep quiet and respect your superiors before I break my foot off so far that you taste rubber every time you burp. Got it, shortstack. The man howled at the top of his lungs, the tone actually causing several people to fall out of their chairs and flee the bar, leaving their half-full and untouched glasses of beer, rum, and other assorted liquors behind. What? Naruto asked, digging in his ears as he brought out a small bit of earwax, balling it up and flicking it at the man, hitting him in the eye. With that, the man turned fully, eye sporting a pulsing vein over it as he tightened his fist. My hair, it's not gray, it's silver. I'm sick and tired of people confusing them, and speaking of which, how do you know Garp-san? I mean other than by reputation. He is one to usually associate with the common rabble. The man said, causing Naruto to rein in his anger. He could understand the feeling. None of your business, Mr. Silver Hair. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to leave and go find some members for my crew. Naruto said, not realizing that he had just admitted to being a sailor in a roundabout way. Silverblood Hidera, former rear admiral at your service. Now then, you said you're looking for members for your crew, so I take it you're a sailor then. What cargo you hauling? The now identified Hidera asked, bowing at the waist as he grasped 3 bottles of rum in one hand. Oh, really, a former rear admiral? I'd ask what happened, except I don't care, so I'll be off now. Naruto said, trying to evade the question as he made for the door, not making it 10 feet before a glass collided with the back of his head, sending slivers of glass in all directions, blood accompanying most pieces. I asked a question, and either out of common courtesy, or fear, most people would answer me, so I'm going to assume that you are neither, and are actually, a pirate that thinks that he can take me. Hidera said, sitting calmly on a table off to the side of Naruto, the boy having never heard the older and more experienced man move an inch, let alone 10 to 15 feet. In his hand, he was tossing another glass up and down. Perched beside him, leaning against the table was that scythe. Grand, he could move silently and swiftly even with a massive hunk of metal adding to his weight and size. The fact that what I assume to be a greenhorn pirate, since I've never seen a wanted poster with your picture, thinks he can take a rear admiral, former or otherwise. And the fact that you seem to know Garp-san on a personal level seems connected. Hidera pointed out, his voice lacking that slur of alcohol, contrary to the at least mugs sitting where he used to occupy. Holding the glass for a second, he smashed it against the table, using a shard to cut his finger as he licked the blood off, a shiver running down Naruto's back. So, unless you have a Logia-type devil fruit ability, I suggest you run before I finish cleaning my hand. Or else, we may see if your confidence is backed up by skill. Hidera said, swinging his scythe effortlessly as he sliced a hole in the thick wall behind him. Lifting his finger over his open mouth, he posed the challenge. Of course, you'll have to get past me to escape, so tell you what, I'll give you a 5-second head start, so run. Hidera shouted, a slasher grin finding its way to his face as Naruto saw a droplet of blood forming at the end of his finger. 5. Naruto kicked off from the ground, his legs a blur as he rushed towards the man. 4. He spun around a chair toppled by the fleeing patrons moments earlier. 3. He hurdled a table, using one arm to propel himself into the air. 2. He pulled his trusty dagger from its sheath on his hip, the glare catching the shining blade. 1. He thrust it down at the man's shoulder. A non-lethal attack, but one that would certainly hinder Hidera's ability to wield that scythe. 0. The dagger hit the skin and slid off as if hitting a metal plate, Naruto's momentum shifting him with it as he tumbled past Hidera, who rose with a slow sureness of a man who knew he could take as long as he wanted. Should you actually manage to beat me and get away, I'll go ahead and tell you a secret about the rankings within the world government. In order for a Marine to reach the Vice Admiral status, they have to be able to use one of the two types of Haki. One such type is the armament Haki, which makes my attacks hit even harder. Hedera informed him as he picked up his scythe, giving it a few test swings which broke several tables. I thought you said that you were a rear admiral. If you can use Haki, why didn't you climb in rank? Naruto asked, crawling backwards towards the hole in the wall. Because that is only half. There are two ways to reach Vice Admiral. The choice is yours. The only requirement is the use of Haki. You can either collect a collective bounty of 800 million berries. Hedera answered as Naruto's eyes widened and he gave a subconscious whistle, or you have to be able to impress a proctor selected for you. I chose the latter, with my proctor being Garp. Hedera finished, the results of the battle already evident since he hadn't climbed in rank. Oh, so you hope that by bringing me in, you can force a rematch and climb higher. Does this have anything to do with that? Whatever that is, Naruto asked, getting one leg under him as he back-flipped away Hedera who hurled another bottle at him. Haha, no, well on the rematch thing. I'm allowed to rematch him whenever. There's just a month-long waiting period between matches. No, my climbing higher in rank does have to do with that though, but that's another secret that I don't feel like sharing. Hedera retorted as he charged Naruto, who rolled to the side, Hedera's side leaving a long gash in the road. So, why are you trying to kill me? Naruto asked confused as he ducked low, the tip of his collar being caught as he was thrown down the street, impacting a lamppost rather hard, considering his vision swam. That is my business, now let's play. Hedera said as he once again charged Naruto, who evaded the attacks. Slight cuts appearing on his body from the near misses. I think we should take this elsewhere, like maybe a square or a large clearing. Naruto said, still weaving by any debilitating hits. Oh. And why is that, short stack? I don't plan on letting you get away from me. Hedera said, swinging his scythe around before releasing it, grabbing the chain as it swung even wider. Naruto being hit as he didn't expect the move. Because as long as we're in this tiny alley, you won't be able to move that massive hunk of metal around as easily. Naruto cried out, the talking hurting his gut. Oh, so you want an honorable fight? Well, Hedera started as he flicked the scythe to his other hand. Swing it straight as a house, which suddenly was divided horizontally. I think I'll manage right here. He finished, returning his scythe to his dominant hand. No, I could care less about an honorable fight, Naruto exclaimed, his demeanor suddenly changing as he released the wound. Not flinching as he moved straight for Hedera, clocking him across the cheek. I just don't want you to have any excuses when I mop the floor with you, salt head. The force of the blow, tossing Hedera away as if he weighed nothing. Oh, that's good, real good, I think you could fit the bill. Hedera said as he pushed himself up with his scythe, running at Naruto who ran down the alley. The chase on as he tried to lose Hedera, swerving suddenly, and climbing rooftops. Finally, he saw an open square, and leaping into the air, he landed in a crouch, and luckily too as Hedera's scythe swished over his head. Where it would have decapitated him. Rising, Naruto saw Hedera standing there, his bloody scythe in hand, a manic grin on his face as he swung at Naruto, the younger male being. Forced to try and block with his dagger as he was sent flying, crashing through the wall of a building. Crawling out with blood pouring from multiple wounds, Naruto glared at the silver-haired man, who charged once again. This time Naruto rolled underneath the swing, bring the sharp dagger up into Hedera's foot. If he was expecting any show of pain, he was sorely disappointed as the wound didn't seem to faze Hedera in the least. In fact, the man smiled even wider, kicking his foot out, throwing Naruto across the square. Then, faster than before, Hedera appeared in front of Naruto, holding up with a hand around his neck. I ate the pain fruit, which lets me control how much pain my body feels. Also, it lets me control how much pain you feel as long as I have my hand on you. I think a demonstration is in order. Hedera said, setting his scythe down before flicking Naruto between the eyes. Naruto gritted his teeth as he told himself that the pain only lasted for a second, but that second seemed to be the longest on ever. Just that tiny flick felt like a cannonball hit him in the face, which sent him into a blackout before being brought back by an even worse force implanting its elf in his stomach as it felt like another cannonball hit him, this time at point blank. As he came back, he realized that the pain didn't seem to go any higher than that. That hurt. He wheezed as his body tried to tell him the pain should have killed him. But there's a limit, isn't there, to how much pain I can feel, or that can limit you yourself to. Naruto added, his voice still hoarse from screaming. Despite the fact he distinctly didn't remember making a sound. Oh, so you noticed. Yeah, I can't totally eliminate pain from my body, nor can I make you feel anything more than I could endure without dying. And it isn't in a steady stream, I have to wait 5 minutes between hands. He admitted, most likely from being impressed that the little snot in front of him was still alive. Most people would have died of a heart attack from the pain, or bitten off their own tongue to try and end it. Yep, so now I just have to keep myself from getting caught again, and thankfully, it's just pain, my stomach hasn't actually exploded. Naruto added, twisting his neck to sink his teeth into Hidera's hand, whose blood flooded his mouth, the iron flavor forming a strange mixture with his own blood. Hidera let him go, just as he planned. As Naruto spun around, dragging the bait of his dagger across Hidera's stomach, blood flowing freely as he jumped back before Hidera caught him again and forced him to endure that torture once more. Hidera grinned and swung his scythe, the blade barely missing Naruto as he flipped over the weapon, bringing his dagger down to try and force Hidera to drop his blade. The man instead just took the stab, using it to hold Naruto in place as he swung a fist which clipped Naruto's chin, his mouth exploding in pain without the use of Hidera's ability. Grunting in pain, he let the dagger loose as Hidera pulled it loose, flinging the little blade at Naruto, piercing his shoulder on the right side, disabling his dominant hand. He followed up with a backhand that set Naruto's vision white with pain. Once again without Hidera's abilities. The older male aimed to finish him off, his earlier hope now gone as the scythe descended, Naruto seemingly out of moves. However, he grew up with Luffy. Which means some of his unpredictability had rubbed off on the boy, proof being that he threw out a punch that sliced past Hidera's cheek, the skin flaying, surprising Hidera. As he didn't have time to stop the pain that exploded into his vision, causing him to pause before killing Naruto, who slid out of the way. Your ability is also a weakness. Did you know that if the body goes without feeling something for a while, the nerve endings become hypersensitive? In other words, if you limit the pain you feel, when you do feel pain, it becomes a lot worse. Also, it seems that since pain lasts such a short time, you have to calculate when it happens to limit it, so if you don't know the attack's coming, you can't stop it as easily. Naruto breathed, blood dripping from his mouth and hand. His rising, however, was cut short as Hidera pinned him to the wall with his scythe, the blade pressing dangerously against Naruto's neck. He would have gulped except it would press his neck against the blade even more, possibly killing himself in the process. Oh really? Well, stop this. Hidera yelled, throwing fist at Naruto's face before Naruto did something unexpected. He spit in Hidera's face, causing the larger man to freeze, giving Naruto time to swing his feet backwards as hard as he could, shattering the wall behind him as he fell backwards into darkness. Flailing around, he grabbed something cold and tossed at Hidera, who climbed through the hole, his usual grin gone as he had an intense look of rage on his face, understandable when someone spits on your face. The object in question was a hammer that clocked Hidera in the face. Once again, due to the darkness, he didn't see the attack coming and therefore couldn't stop the pain as he howled as blood erupted from above his left eye where the hammer had struck him as he stumbled back into the square, giving time for Naruto to catch his breath. Breathing heavily and with a plan, Naruto followed Hidera, who was sitting in the center of the square nursing his wound as blood flowed into his mouth. Blood, 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 my blood, my blood, I love the taste of my blood. Hidera screeched as he whirled on Naruto, his eyes matching his mouth which seemed frozen in manic glee. His tongue roving around his face, licking up every trace of blood it could reach. Dropping his scythe, Hidera wrapped the last 3 links around his hand, his fingers fitting in each one like a slot as he began to spin, the line playing out as the scythe spun around, making a massive silver disc in the square as the scythe sliced up everything that touched it. Well crap, this complicates matters, though I suppose it wouldn't be fun if it was easy after all. Okay, now focus and Kitsune fire. Naruto whispered as he did a palm T rust which sent a tiny fireball at Hidera, who blocked the attack with his hand, not flinching as the fire seared his nerve endings. Well, That didn't work, at least that wasn't my original plan, or I would have been in trouble. Still, I can't use fire like Ace Odoto, but I'd like to think it still was a bit hot. Naruto lamented as he tried a new trick, a fast flurry of punches that sent numerous fire bursts that impacted the scythe's chain, turning it red as the heat spread. That won't work, short stack, I can't feel the heat, remember? Hidera taunted from his seemingly safe position in the center of the square. No, I remembered, I just wasn't aiming to hurt you. What I was aiming for, Naruto started as he front flipped into the square, bringing the hammer from before down on the chain where it glows hottest. The chain disintegrating as it melted, was to melt this annoying chain and leave you weaponless. Naruto finished, smiling with a canine hanging over his bottom lip, giving him a roguish appearance. Now then, how about we resume our fight, shall we? Naruto asked rhetorically as he charged Hidera, hurling the hammer around in a vicious arc that left the end embedded in Hidera's knee. Leaping backwards, Naruto stood upright, turning on his heel and putting his hands in his pockets. Get back here, we aren't done yet. Hidera yelled, running after Naruto, only for his leg to snap under him, sending the silver-headed man down to the cobblestones. Yet another weakness of your fruit. Pain is the body's way of saying, stop. By continuing after the pain happens, you endanger your health. Likewise, by you turning off your pain receptors, you didn't feel the warning that your leg was broken. As long as you didn't apply any weight on it, you would been fine, but you tried to chase after me and paid for it. Naruto said, turning to face Hidera as he crawled across the ground, pulling himself after Naruto with his scythe. Kill me, he ordered, holding out the scythe to Naruto, who grabbed the edge only for it to clatter to the ground, its weight far beyond what Naruto could hold steadily. No, Naruto countered, sitting down just out of Hidera's range on a rooftop, staring down at the injured man. Why, I lost, you should kill me so that I won't kill you later. Hidera reasoned, causing the younger male to lean back and stare at the sun overhead. No, killing you is pointless. You did nothing to me to earn my anger to that degree. Had you endangered my friend, or family, the case may be different, but just trying to kill me isn't enough to deserve a death sentence. Naruto argued, his face showing no anger to the downed former marine. Now then, if you'll excuse me, I must be off, things to do, people to see, and marine to defeat and all, you know. Naruto said, rising from his position as he turned to leg, his legs tensed in preparation for a jump. Wait, take me with you? Hidera asked, Naruto stumbling as he turned to look at the man with wariness uncommon to people his age. Why, pray tell, would a former marine ask to join a pirate crew? Naruto asked, still not buying the act as Hidera pushed himself to his feet, bracing himself on his side. My dream, he started. Inhaling deeply as he began his story, is to kill this man. He pulled out a wanted poster for demonstration, the distance leaving no details for Naruto to scrutinize, only the enormous bounty. 560 million berries. This man is my father, and also, my family's murderer. With her dying breath, my mother asked me to find forgiveness for our family in my father, and so I joined the Marines. However, little known fact, they divided who is able to chase and or capture a wanted criminal. For bounty above 350 million, a rear admiral is recommended. For bounties 420 and above, a vice admiral is wanted. And for bounties 500 and above, an admiral is wanted. Then, there are the Yonko, which require a minimum of 2 admirals, and 15 vice admirals, basically, the EQU. Equivalent of 2 full-force buster calls are needed for someone of Yonko status. So, I'm forbidden from chasing my father until I became an admiral. However, to reach admiral status, one has to beat a current admiral. Or be selected by the fleet admiral, who would most likely select someone who was able to do the latter task. The current 3 admirals are all Logia types, with one being far faster than me, one being rather hot-headed. Leaving Aokiji. He is the personal favorite to become the next fleet admiral, although, I think the council will elect a Kainu. Hidera paused for breath here, allowing Naruto to take it all in. Garp had spoken of the 3 admirals, never really mentioning their powers, only that they are far more powerful than Luffy, Ace, Sabo, and Naruto combined. So, I was given the option of biding my time to catch him, and gaining the necessary influence to order a buster call on him. But, while I wait to beat an old man, even one that helped to catch Galdi. Roger, my father grows ever stronger. Slowly approaching Yonko status, and then he'll be even further out of my reach. So I left. I'm a traitor by name and definition, and I made a promise that I would find someone powerful to help me on my quest. The first person to beat my in battle, pirate or otherwise. You've demonstrated a decent tactical mind, good physical skills, and did I detect a hint of hockey in a few of those blows? Furthermore, you are compassionate, which leads me to believe that you would help a person out, even a former enemy. I ask once again, take me with you, and help me to kill my father. Hidera finished, almost begging the last part as Naruto frowned. So basically, you want me to take pity on a defeated old man, who wants to kill his father, and who I have every right to kill on the spot, as if you could stop me. Naruto asked, and receiving a nod followed by a low bow of deference, he sighed. Well then, how can I refuse that? I just hope you have the skill to keep up with me. And the self-control not to kill everyone that commented on your silver hair. Naruto said as he leapt down, sliding an arm under Hidera's shoulder and helping along the path. I hope there's a boat at the marine base because I think mine drifted away. Naruto added, and smiled at Hidera's booming laughter as the pair of fighters worked their way to the marine base, and their escape of this island. Now then, since I have my first mate, what should we be called? Bloody foxes, no, too bloody. Silver foxes, no, too girly. The Squirtle Squad, nope, don't even know where that came from. Oh well, I think of it later. Maybe after we get someone else on board. Naruto said, Hidera chuckling beside him. Yeah, and if we're lucky, it'll be a hot one too, maybe a busty redhead. Hidera added, Naruto giving him a skeptical look. Haha, I doubt it, with my luck and your preference, it'll probably be some flat-chested girl with an affinity to leather and chains. Naruto countered, Hidera contemplating said girl. Leather and chains, it might be fun, so long as she has nice rich blood, and a sword, every girl needs a big sword to go in there, Hidera started, Naruto deciding that was enough and dropping him as he hit the pavement, the end of his sentence being muffled, sheesh. Are we there yet? Hidera whined from his position on the rear of the ship, 5 feet away from Naruto, who had to duck to avoid his side whenever he turned to the sides. Quite frankly, he was 5 seconds away from finding out if Hidera could swim when he spotted a tiny black dot on the horizon. No. Now stop your incessant whining or I'll learn how to balance on a plank of wood and burn this boat to ashes, with you on it. Naruto shouted, his head tripling size, his eyes whiting out, and his teeth changing into jagged points. Although several already were. Looking back to the dot, it hadn't gotten any closer, so it was probably an island, or a ship that was just lazing about. Looking back to check on his partner, he saw how the sea was affecting the silver-haired sadist. His eyes were half-lidded, his hair seemed to droop unnaturally, and his body sagged under its own weight. Just from those things, Naruto could tell that he was ready to have more space to roam around on. Maybe the coming island would suffice for his need to run around. Hey, Hidera, tell me why you thought a GHY was the best choice to steal from the marine dockyards when we could have taken a much larger one that would have given you plenty of room to run around on. Naruto asked his first mate, grabbing a street ick and skewering several fish that nibbled at his toes. Because, genius, they would have noticed if a larger ship was missing, correct, but they are unlikely to notice a missing dinghy. Hidera grunted back, throwing his scythe out at a bird that barely dodged the attack, giving a loud caw-caw in fright and warning as it flew out of his range. Who cares, we're pirates now, we steal things, it's how the system works. Besides, whether they noticed or not, we would have been long gone and they wouldn't know who to blame for the theft. Naruto argued back, heating up his hands to a suitable temperature as the fish cooked in his hands. Oh really, I beg to, you know I hate it when you're right. They may have suspicions, but they wouldn't suspect me, maybe that pirate robber I've heard of running around stealing from everyone. Hidera grumbled as his hand shot up to catch the fish Naruto tossed to him, the scales being destroyed by the heat. Exactly, now get ready, I see something ahead and we may have to defend ourselves. I would prefer not to die before my pirate adventure ever really gets started. Naruto grumbled as the black shape got closer, light noises barely heard over the sea. Focusing his attention on them. Naruto recognized them as voices yelling. He turned to tell Hidera when an explosion of water went off next to them. Kuso, Marines. Hidera, get up here and defend our ship before we both get killed. Naruto yelled to his companion, who grunted, climbing to his feet and blocking another cannonball that would have hit them. Reacting quickly, Naruto focused on his target, launching a small fireball from his palm, but the tiny flame was extinguished due to the water spray from the explosions. Once again, Kuso, you're on your own Hidera until we get closer to that ship. Think you can hold those shots off? Naruto asked as he tried to bail out the water that landed in their tiny boat from the explosions. Yeah, I can hold them off, but they've started dropping their shots short. We aren't getting any closer to them. I would say that's fine since they'll run out of ammo eventually, but some of them are getting brave and trying to swim over here. Hidera announced as Naruto whirled on his heel. An idea forming in his head as he focused all the fire he could create to his palm and firing as fast as he could facing backwards. The force of each shot slowly pushed them forwards, despite the wave against them. God, I hope we haven't got much farther to go because I'm starting to run out of juice, and if we have to fight, I won't be very useful. Naruto complained before the boat shifted and he tumbled to the bottom. Unfortunately, he still was channeling fire to his hands, which he caught himself with, caused the fire to leap to the wood. Kuso, this just isn't our day. The boat's on fire now, so maybe we should consider surrendering, at least we could fight our way off of the ship or take it over, huh? Naruto shouted over the explosions of water. The fire making holes through which water flowed in, slowly sinking the ship and bringing both occupants' death closer and closer. Fine, hold on, I'm going to do something stupid and dangerous. Hidera yelped back as Naruto dug his nails into his shoulders, climbing on top of the older male's head. Growling in warning, Hidera wrapped the chain of his scythe around his waist before swinging it around over his head, slinging it at the ship as the superior metal sunk into the wood of the deck. Okay, your turn, run along the chain and get to the ship, then pull me up, okay? Hidera ordered as if he were the captain. However, Naruto didn't mind. After all, a captain knows when to follow his friend's orders, which is what he did. He hung limply from the metal links as they swayed in tea. He whined in with the motions of either ship, a fact that reminded Naruto that Hidera would die if he didn't hurry. Gritting his teeth as little bits that stuck off of the chain, most likely to aid in battle, dug into his palms. He hurried himself along the chain before swinging around to get one arm over the edge of the ship, pulling himself up. Seeing many Marines glaring at him, he gave his best, "I'm better than you, glare back," ordering them to stand down. You bumbling fools, you're supposed to announce yourselves before firing on an unmarked ship. Now come over here and help me reel in my partner. Naruto ordered as the low-ranking Marines jumped at the commanding tone, and then deciding not to earn his wrath as they hurried over to pull Hidera up by the length of his chain. Unfortunately, they weren't fast enough, and the tiny ship vanished beneath the swirling tides of the unforgiving ocean. However, Naruto kept ordering them to pull harder, and finally, Hidera emerged from the ocean, his eyes lifeless and seawater dripping off of him in small streams. Hauling the silver-haired man over the edge, Naruto laid him out flat, pressing on his chest to try and dislodge the water most likely trapped in his lungs. When that failed, he looked to the Marines. "Are there any females on board, preferably pretty ones?" he asked, only to be met with various looks of confusion. Sir, don't you think you should save him first before you have sex?" one of the heavier-set Marine asked, his voice deep and reminding Naruto of a cow. A tick mark formed over his right eye before he backhanded the fat man, sending him into the thick mast, leaving an indentation where he hit. "Not for me, Baka. For my partner, he needs CPR and I'm sure he would rather a hot woman do it than me or one of you smelly cretins," Naruto shouted, causing several Marines to sweat drop, as well as others to sniff themselves before cringing. "Now then, if you would please direct me to the nearest female of legal age, preferably hot. I would appreciate it," Naruto remarked before motioning for someone to lead him. The appointed guide seemed hesitant for a moment, before Naruto pointed out that the man currently dying on the deck was a high-ranking Marine, and he jumped to his job, rushing off down the deck towards a door, most likely to the captain's quarters, or barracks. As the captain, or whatever rank she may be, the only female on board, When I requested a pretty female, I didn't mean that in the literal term, just a female will do, even a lower-ranking officer such as yourself. Naruto commented as the Marine rushed about, checking doors along the hallway they were located in. No, it isn't that, but we only have one female currently on board, and that happens to be Vice Admiral Tycho's wife. The Marine answered, using the air quotes around wife. Is it something I should know? If it affects the safety of my partner, and myself by proxy, I feel that I may need to know if this is okay. Naruto said, purposefully using larger words to make himself seem like a higher up. No, it's just that, well, Vice Admiral Tycho has a spotless record, he's never been beaten in battle, so, he has started abusing his power. And forced one of the local women into marriage with him. Had she refused, not only would her family have been arrested and killed for crimes against the world government. Not only that, but he forced her to consume a devil fruit, a fate that one should decide for themselves. As such, please excuse her appearance. The Marine retorted as they rounded a corner to yet another hallway of doors. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a cigar, offering it to Naruto, possibly as a way of forming a bond. He probably hoped that Naruto and Hidera would request a transfer for him to get away from the dreaded Vice Admiral, something that neither one of them could do, at least, not without breaking the law. No thanks, you keep it, I don't know how this event will turn out. And I don't want to disappoint someone that could have a bright future. All the same, give me your name, and I'll see what I can do about the situation, Naruto I smiled to the male, who shrugged before placing the cigar in his mouth, despite one already being there. Chief Petty Officer Smoker, under the command of Vice Admiral Brindle, sir. The now-named Smoker answered, saluting his superior, as Naruto nodded. Turning and entering the room, but not before saying something that surprised even him, although Smoker was already leaving and hadn't heard it. Smoker, why is it that I get the same feeling from you that I do around Garpu? Naruto wondered aloud, then pushing the door open with his shoe. However, what he saw within the room left him speechless as a woman, aged at about 20, was sitting on one of the few articles of furniture in the room. The woman most certainly had a strange appearance, leading Naruto to believe that this was the Vice Admiral's wife. Instead of human ears, a pair of cow ears stuck out of her chocolate brown hair, her pale white eyes were half-lidded and her mouth was half open, moving around as if she were chewing on something. A cowbell was around her neck, leading the eyes to her most prominent features, not they needed any help. The woman couldn't have weighed more than 150 pounds, and at least a third of that was from her gigantic breasts which were covered with a sheet. Naruto couldn't see her entire lower body or torso due to the sheer size of her breasts, and on the large sheet, 2 wet spots were forming as the fleas jiggled around due to the ocean's movement. Hello, I take it that you're the Vice Admiral's wife, albeit by force. Naruto asked as he heard a light sniffling, and looking closer, he saw tears in the woman's eyes as her mouth continued its repetitive chewing motion. He saw her try to push herself to her feet, only for her weight to keep her seated on the bed. She started, her voice falling to a low mumble almost instantly. Naruto walked closer, skirting the walls to avoid any accidental touching of the woman's organs. He had witnessed what a woman would do to a man she didn't want touching her there. Nope. A pirate he may be, but not a molester, pervert maybe, but no molester. What was that? I couldn't hear you. Naruto asked the woman once he was closer, the woman turning her head to face him as his cheeks flared. And she let out a low moo. Naruto looked at the woman confused before remembering what Smoker had said. The moo fruit model, dairy cow. Is that the fruit the Vice Admiral forced you to eat? Is that why you have such? Naruto started before trailing off as he reconsidered finishing the sentence as the woman's tears increased and she tried to nod. Help me, he hasn't milked me in several days and it hurts so much, I feel like they're going to burst. Please sir, won't you help me? I can provide you with my milk. It is very rich and healthy for you. It would surely go for a high price at market. And then, after you milk me, my should shrink so that I can move and escape. The woman begged as the tears cut a waterfall down her cheeks, the liquid wetting the sheet, causing it to become partially see-through. Milk you. But, how do you know that I'm not a marine that works with your husband? And even if I were to milk you, I couldn't just take your milk, you made it. You could take it with you, to buy passage back to your family wherever they are. Naruto almost shouted, catching himself as he didn't want to be discovered. No, it's okay, my family lives on the nearby island. Smithy Island. It is a beautiful home, with rolling hills, wide open farms, not all modern like other island that have been used as a marine base. I can get to the island on your ship. Since you can't be a marine, since I know the faces and voices of all the marines under my husband's service. You don't look all that wet, so I assume you didn't wash up. The woman said as she once again begged Naruto to milk her to alleviate the pressure from the built-up milk. Oh God, why me? Sure, I can milk you, just hold on while I find something to catch it in. Naruto mumbled, blushing intensely as he found a large washtub, presumably for the woman, which he dragged over to the ends of her breasts. Placing the tub, he lifted the sheet, wrapping a hand around one of her nipples as she let loose with another moo. So tell me, why is there a marine base on Smithy Island, if it isn't modern? Naruto asked, as he forced the blood back down, and away from other organs. His one hand pulling gently on the nipple, and the other working diligently to massage the breast to ease the pain and passage of milk. Because, Smithy Island is one of the leading exporters of weapons. And is rumored to be the location to one of the seastone wells. The reason for the high export percentage is because although factories can mass produce, ours are of the highest quality. Which can't be replicated by machines. The exact process is a secret that only the village master knows, as well as his apprentices. You see, every 5 years, he chooses a young child, and talks them to the forges for the next 5 years, until it is time for a new apprentice to be chosen. No one knows what he does to them, but they emerge as changed products, built like a workhorse, with the stamina of a bull. Although their weapons still don't compare to the weapon masters, the quality is still treasured. I've heard that they've captured the current weapon master, and are aiding him to find out the location of the seastone well on the island. The woman said, her cheeks red as she blushed at the intense pleasure shooting through her body. Several minutes passed before Naruto stood up, patting the woman's back, soothing her. There you go, you should be able to move better now, they should have lifeboats stored at the rear of the ship, so, I guess this is goodbye. Do me a favor though. Go back to your family, be with them, I'll take care of the marines. Naruto said as the woman nodded, racing for the door, her bare feet barely making a noise as she ran, her arms cradling her breasts as she ran. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, you've been so helpful. My name is Hanabi, Black Hanabi. Come find me after all of this, I have something I want to give to you. Hanabi said as she turned back at the last second, smiling at Naruto before racing off once again. Naruto sighed before walking back to the deck, thinking up a plan as he walked. He couldn't think of anything yet when he hadn't seen the vice admiral in a fight yet. Sighing once more, he came out of the ship, only to find his first mate, handcuffed with seastone cuffs, his head still drooping in unconsciousness. Next to him was Smoker. And on the other side was a woman with a half-unbuttoned pale blue shirt. Her hair was a rich black and had 2 points sticking up like cat ears, but what drew Naruto's eyes was the quiver of arrows and bow on her back. Still, the man that stood over them all, if you could call it that, was the one exuding the aura of a vice admiral. He stood at an impressive 4 feet 8 inches. With a head of regal red hair that was ruffled, and a long beard of the same color that reached to his feet. He had a pot belly, and his arms were the size of his head, but with muscle instead of fat. His eyes were black coals. And his mouth was set in a half-smile which revealed that he was missing a tooth on the right side. His weapon of choice was a dual-sided pick, and looking closely, Naruto could see that it was extendable. Deciding to test the waters, Naruto charged the cat girl, feeling that she was the weak link as she was an established long-range combat specialist, and he felt he could easily remove a player from the equation. Stupid arrogance. Unfortunately, in doing so, he forgot the first rule of long-range combat, speed. Long-range fighters countered their weakness by being swift. Something that Naruto forgot as the girl vanished from his sight, only to appear on the side of the ship, balancing perfectly on an extended cannon as she punched Naruto in the face, sending him reeling back. right into the Vice Admiral's grasp as he clamped a pair of sea-stone cuffs on Naruto as well before using a swift chop to the back of the neck to send him into not-so-blissful unconsciousness. Naruto awoke to the feeling of cold stone on his cheek, and his shoulder bent at an awkward angle due to the cuffs, which he felt draining his strength, something that annoyed him as he tried to pull the cuffs apart without much success. "Don't worry about it, Gaki. If those things broke, I would be ashamed," a voice said, Naruto looking up to see an older man staring at him with a level gaze. The man certainly had the blacksmith look going on with the soot-covered clothes and skin, and the rigid muscles caused by heavy lifting and sharp hammering, and thickly calloused due to injuries and heat caused by the blast furnace. "Why, I'd ask if you made them, but you look too old to be involved in smithing," Naruto said, throwing in a smirk for good measure. "Ha, just for that comment, Gaki. I'm not going to answer your questions, no matter how much you beg me," the man said, his face splitting in a good-hearted smile. "Not my problem. I don't need to ask an old man anything, after all. Your age has probably screwed up your memory. Although, I do have to wonder, why you don't just tell them where the seastone wells are," Naruto said, earning him a pair of widened eyes. Breathing deeply, Naruto swung his hands under him as he lay on his back. Planting both feet on the wall, Naruto pushed upwards as his body spun in midair, allowing him to land on his feet. Then, once standing, he kicked his door to see how tough it was. "Not going to happen, Gaki, trust me, I practically built the entire marine base here from the ground up, and as for why I refuse to tell them the location of the seastone well is because if I did, they would take over this whole island and set up big factories to use the stuff, ruining me and my family's livelihood. Tell me, boy, what do you know of how seastone is made by the earth?" the old blacksmith asked as he sat on a bench, his head hung low with his hair overshadowing his eyes. "Nothing really, other than the fact that it is basically the sea in solid form. Which really has nothing to do with how it is made," Naruto admitted, chuckling lowly at his lack of knowledge. "Well, let me tell you, just in case I don't make it, I want you to tell it to my daughter. Her name is Chanel, Black Chanel," he said as Naruto's eyes widened. Was the woman from the ship related to them? He wanted to ask, but didn't want to give him false hope. "Oi, Gaki, I'm talking here. Now pay attention cause I don't like repeating myself. Seastone is, as you said, the sea in solid form, however, it is made through a mixture of silicate, obsidian, seawater, and sea king bones. Mixed together, then put under extreme pressure, while cooled by sea currents, what comes out is seastone. However, what that Vice Admiral's after is the red seastone, which is made by removing the seastone while it's still being formed, and placing it in a blast furnace, then heating it to 250 degrees, remember that, any less and it won't melt, any more and it'll turn in to glowstone, which basically is luminescent, but that's it, got it? Now red seastone, as I'm sure you're wondering, is the opposite of seastone. That's right, it enhances devil fruit abilities," the old man said, shutting his mouth rather sudden when the girl from earlier entered the cell block. "Well, it's your lucky day, pirate. Brindle-sama has decided to move your execution up to, now. Come quietly. And don't resist and we may let you have some last words," the girl said as the blacksmith watched him intently to see what would happen. "How about, instead, I choose the method of mine and my partner's death? Sound good, kitty?" Naruto said, trying to be as blatantly rude as possible. The girl sneered back, shaking her head. "Sure, it doesn't matter to us how you die, dead is dead, and us to be sure that you don't pull a fast one on us, we're leaving those cuffs on the both of you, got it, punk?" the girl said as she led him outside, kicking Hidera awake as he somehow was still unconscious from the earlier ordeals. While she did this, Naruto turned back to the blacksmith. "Don't worry about it, your daughter will be fine. After all, I can be pretty resourceful when I have to, old man," Naruto said, winking at the old man before smiling at his hidden plan. "Okay, now where to, your highness?" the girl asked in contempt as she dragged Hidera along as he resisted the pulling girl. "How do you feel about being dropped down a well shaft, Hidera?" Naruto asked as he nodded one last time at the blacksmith. The old man nodded back before returning to his moping state. Looking back at him as the girl led them both outside, Naruto snickered, and continued snickering up to the point where they were standing on the edge of a well shaft in the center of the village as the Illage was forced to watch the public execution. This is what awaits those that try to oppose Brindle-sama. The girl said as she began a long speech about the Marines and how great Vice Admiral Brindle was. Despite the fact that no one believed her. Hey Naruto, I hope you got a plan, cause I don't feel like going for another swim today. Hidera said, with a slight undertone of fear as he faced every devil fruit eater's greatest weakness, water. Huh, no plan that this boy here could think of can get you out of this one, you got it. The girl said as she laughed in a very maniacal way before socking Naruto in the cheek as he fell backwards down the hole, Hidera following not 5 seconds afterwards as the girl walked off, the villagers running to the well to look down it in hope. Sir, I've called to report that I've encountered a strange pirate today. He was no pushover, but I've never heard of him before. I believe he may have been a member of the revolutionaries, possibly quite high-ranking judging from his skill. I gave my second-in-command the order to execute him, but I suspect, if he's as good as I think he is, he'll be back. Vice Admiral Brindle said over the snail phone, person on the other side, hemming at the report. Well then, I suppose I don't have to tell you to be careful with this one. I don't care if he shows up next time dressed in a clown suit with crotchless chaps on his head. There is a method to his madness, your only problem will be figuring it out. If that is all, I will let you get back to your job, but one last piece of advice, don't lose control of the ball. Keep him in your court and on the defensive, or he will steal the ball from right under your nose, and take it straight to the basket. The person on the other side said, the static of the phone masking his voice. Aye, sir. Brindle answered as he hung up the receiver. Meanwhile, far off at Marine headquarters, a young male leaned back in his chair, sighing as he considered his options. Figures I would find him in the first place I look, just my luck. Hey, Abby-chan, I have an order for you. The male said as he spun around in his chair to face a dark-skinned woman with a clipboard in one arm, and a cigarette. Yes, sir, she asked, taking a long drag of her cancer stick as the smoke floated to the roof, filtering through the system to come back as clean air. Contact Vice Admiral Phoenix, tell him the Fox has landed, and that his best friend could use some help on Smithy Island. Also inform him that he has 3 days to report in, or he's going to take a cut in pay. He may use the drive system. As long as he's in open water, and he has no choice. The male said, continually spinning around in his chair. The drive system, sir, are you sure that is a wise idea? Abby asked as she put out her cigarette, her face turning serious as she stared down her commander. Of course it's not a wise choice, but what other options are there? I need him on that island ASAP. And the drive system always delivers fast results. Now then, I believe I gave you an order, now hurry back, and we'll see about dinner. The male said with a small smile. Meanwhile on Smithy Island, on a large open farm, a girl was breathing heavily as she toiled over the forge, crafting a blade as she inspected it carefully, huffing as she tossed it back into fire, pulling it out again as she nodded acceptingly. Hammering the blade into her desired shape. Hearing a commotion outside, the girl set the blade aside, dropping it into a trough of water to cool as steam plumed up from the trough. Turning around, the girl removed her heavy fire-resistant gloves, and wiped her brow, which was heavily coated in sweat. Walking outside, she was forced to squint her eyes as the sun nearly blinded her. The dark insides of the forge room a sharp contrast to the bright outside of her family's farm. When her eyes had finally adjusted, she opened them, glaring at the two strangers, one slumped over the other's shoulder. Hey, we don't want any drunks, so get going before I'm forced to make you leave. The girl said as she grabbed a spare sword from beside the door, hefting it with the point up. A dangerous weapon in her hands with her toughened arms from the intense heat of the forge. Oh, we aren't drunks. My friend is just tired after climbing out of that well. Not to mention he's still got this stupid seastone cuff on his wrist, like some kind of trophy. Come on Hidera, wake up before I'm forced to drop you on the ground like a sack of potatoes, which probably have more sense than you I'd figure. The younger one, a blonde said as he jabbed his partner in the side, who groaned ceremoniously and collapsed to the ground. Grand, it ain't that bad, you old man. Anyways, can I get some directions? I'm looking for a blacksmith's around here somewhere, but all these farms look the same to me. The boy admitted, looking around as if the place would just appear out of nowhere. No, I don't even know you. For all I know, you could be Marines in disguise, come to kidnap another one of us to interrogate, or to use as leverage to make my father tell you where the Seastone Well is hidden." The girl said, hefting the sword up again in a threatening manner, before the boy sighed, kicking his partner in the side, who gave another groan. "Oh well, it was worth a shot. Although, if we were Marines. Thanks for the idea of what to do with you. But I figure you might be who I'm looking for. Would you happen to be Chanel Black, the blacksmith's daughter?" The boy asked as she tensed up, bringing her sword around so the tip was placed against the boy's neck. "Shut up, I don't know who you are, but you don't get to leave here now, Marines are not," she shouted, the boy sighing once more. As a smile began creeping across his face. "I take it you are then. Your dad says to tell you that you're in charge of the shop if he doesn't make it." "My name's Naruto, if that matters," Naruto said, taking a step back as Chanel advanced on him, dodging as she almost stabbed him with the sword as she grabbed his collar. "My dad, you saw him. How is he? Is he eating enough? When are they going to release him?" Chanel asked rapidly as Naruto kept retreating away from her as she chased him, Hidera groaning as they ran over him several times before lifting his head just enough for Chanel's boot to club him in the face, sending him back into unconsciousness. Finally, their chase was ended as a young man came up, carrying a newspaper. "Hello, Nelly, have you heard the news?" he asked frantically. Chanel pausing as she looked at him with a questioning look. Naruto stopped in his running as he came over to join the conversation. "No, what's happened, Kunis?" Chanel asked, the boy cringing as he tried to avoid her eyes. "Hey, don't worry. Whatever it is, you can tell me, I won't get angry," Chanel assured the boy's face changing to a half-relieved look, obviously in unbelief. "It's your father. The Marines are making their move now, or rather, in a week. Your father is going to be publicly executed, and until then, Brindle has said that he'll be kept a prisoner on his ship 2 miles offshore. What's more, he's stated that every day, he's going to kill one of the villagers until you turn yourself in. He's even offering up a reward for your capture, 130,000 berries," Kunis said, Chanel's face dropping as she clutched her sword tighter, her calloused knuckles turning white as she made for the road. "Wait a minute, Chanel. Where are you going?" Naruto asked as he grabbed her wrist. She turned back, glaring at him as she yanked her wrist free, continuing towards the road. "What do you think I'm doing? I'm going to rescue my father," Chanel said, stopping as a large shadow blocked her path. "Sorry, can't let you do that. Listen, just give us a week, and we'll help you, unless of course, you think you can take on a ship full of Marines, plus a vice admiral, and his second-in-command, Kathy," Hidera said, sighing as he rubbed his neck, his tongue running nervously over his lips and teeth. "Something the matter, Hidera? You look like an addict in withdrawal," Naruto asked, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder before punching him across the cheek. "Yeah, I'm fine, it's just, I don't like feeling like this. You know, vulnerable, without my powers, I feel like any little thing could send me into a sense overload," Hidera admitted, hissing through his teeth as Naruto hit him again. "Would you stop that, you annoying mosquito?" he demanded as he grabbed his wrist as he tried to punch him another time. "See, you're fine, I hit you 3 times and you're still alive and pestering, old man," Naruto said, rotating his wrist, gritting his teeth as his arm popped. However, he did send Hidera to the ground in a heap. "What are you two, children? I probably stand more of a chance against the ship by myself, than with you two helping me. At least then I won't be worried about you two if I'm forced to abandon you," Chanel said, trying to get past the heap of Hidera, only for his hand to flash out, gripping her ankle with surprising strength considering his condition. "Hey now, I know we may not look like much, but trust me when I say, you want us on your side. Brindle is a perfect example. He's a midget, he's annoying, and he cusses like a Marine, hee. But he earned that title of Vice Admiral through his fighting skills. Not to mention his skills, he was the former record holder for most kills with that fricking pick of his. He once killed over 3,000 pirates in a single attack on an island," Hidera said, standing up, letting Chanel go as she swung her sword at him, Hidera blocking the blade with the cuff on his wrist. The metal glanced off the stone, embedding in the ground. Chanel continued glaring at Hidera as she pulled the sword free, pointing at him. Fight me and prove that you're not just blowing hot air," Chanel said. As Hedera leveled a glare of his own at her, causing her to take a step back as his eyes lightened slightly, but Naruto could see the controlled emotions raging behind them. "No, you can't beat me. Besides, I don't have my scythe. My powers are out of commission right now, and I don't just fight someone for no reason other than to prove that I'm not a liar," Hedera said, turning away as Chanel's yes grew inflamed as she tried to bring her sword down on his back, only for Naruto to catch the blade with a metal bar, his eyes making her stop as she saw herself dying numerous times in those eyes. "I'll fight you, provided you do something for me. Oh, and don't try to stab my crewmate in the back again, or you'll find out just why he's not just blowing hot air. Now dearie, we're pirates, so do think for a second we're doing this to prove ourselves. A pirate will lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what he wants, so remember that," Naruto said, flicking his wrist to the side, sending the metal bar through the stone wall. "Ha! I don't want to fight you, Pipsqueak, I want to fight the old man. He's the strong one here, so don't think you can intimidate me, little boy," Chanel shouted, pressing her nose to Naruto's as his eyes grew colder, Hedera grinning viciously behind him, although neither one could see it. "Hey little girl, not that it matters, but that, little boy, happens to be my captain. And that was without a weapon, and me fully prepared, so picking a fight with potentially the strongest person on this island, not a smart idea," Hedera exclaimed, Chanel gasping as she took several steps back, glancing at Hedera to see if he was lying. "Now then, as I was saying, you do me a favor, and I'll fight you, and for you to rescue your father. Now then, as for this favor, I am tired of not having a sword by my side. You build me a sword to my designs, and you have a deal," Naruto said, extending his hand as his eyes changed back to their usual glimmering pools of azure. "Why would I do that for you? I could just attack on my own. If I hurry, I can get to him before they get off the island," Chanel said, turning on her heel, only for the way out to be blocked by Naruto, his arms crossed over his chest. "Maybe I didn't make myself clear. Either you make me a decent sword, or you will die," Naruto said, sitting down on the ground. "Provided of course that you can get past me, which I highly doubt," Naruto added as Chanel tried to run past him, only to be sent flying back. "Look, we don't have to be best friends, just help me, and I'll help you. Remember, I met your old man, he seems nice. I won't let anything happen to him if you'll just put your trust in us, Chanel, and I'll even pay you if it helps," Naruto assured her as she fell to the floor, refusing to cry in front of this boy. After all, she was in charge right now, and couldn't let herself show any weakness. "Fine, but 1 week, that's all I'm waiting. After that, our cooperation is over, understand?" Chanel said, extending her hand to Naruto as she stood up, not meeting his gaze as it softened, a faint smile on his lips. "Of course, now then, better get started on that blade. I would like to get some practice with it before we attack a trained marine crew," Naruto said, Chanel pulling him up as she sighed, leading him to the forge room, asking him questions on the designs while they walked. "What kind of sword are we talking about? Saber, broadsword, cutlass, katana? What metal we use depends on the blade type. Is some art meant to mold like others?" Chanel asked, stepping on the bellows as she pulled her red hood up, keeping her hair contained so that it didn't catch fire. Grabbing her gloves from the anvil beside the forge, she slid them on, curling and uncurling her fringe. To get used to the resistance of the gloves. "I'm thinking about a cutlass design with a lightweight metal, while on the hand guard, could we use a heavier metal?" Naruto asked as the two began discussing the designs. Chanel correcting things that she was incapable of doing, and adding suggestions for certain purposes. Several hours later, Naruto shook hands with the girl, smiling happily, the girl unable to contain her excitement at forging the weapon as she too was smiling, shaking his hand, marking the start of a wonder partnership. Over the next 3 days, Chanel worked on the sword, as well as her own, fixing impurities in the metals, working on combining the two different weighted materials. Consistently, every day, Naruto would join her in the forge room for anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, keeping her company, while Hedera patrolled the shoreline and village, keeping watch for any signs of trouble. At sunset on the 3rd day, when Hedera returned, he found Naruto and Chanel sparring with their swords. Naruto having more trouble judging from the numerous cuts on his body. "Hey guys, hope you're ready for the rescue because things just got more serious," Hidera said, his tone serious rather than his usual joking one. Naruto held up his hand to stop the spar as he turned to Hidera. "What did you find out? Did they move up the date?" Naruto asked, Chanel on pins and needles waiting to rescue her father from the Marines. "Well, that's half of it, they've moved the date up to day after tomorrow. If you ask me, it would be tomorrow morning at first light, or noon, but reinforcements have arrived. Possibly the worst person that could have come," Hidera answered, leaning on his scythe as he inspected Naruto's new sword. Vice Admiral Phoenix, commander of the 3rd Battalion, renowned for their cannoneers. Not to mention an expert marksman, and I don't just hand out titles based on hearsay. I once saw him blow up a town from 3 miles offshore, with a single cannonball. In the academy, he and Brindle bonded, and formed a deadly pair with Brindle overpowered close combat style, and Phoenix's long-range marksman skills. If we're lucky, Phoenix will stay offshore and guard the ships, while you just have Brindle to handle," Hidera said, heading towards the house. "What do you mean, you just have Brindle to take care of, and where are you going to be during all this?" Naruto asked, picking the tip of his sword up as he prepared to finish his spar. "I'm going to be on those ships, waging a one-man war against Phoenix and his crew to keep them occupied while you rescue her old man," Hidera said, setting his scythe inside the door as he shut it behind him. "Well, looks like I'm going to have to amp up my training schedule, hope you don't mind going all out against me, little girl," Naruto taunted, a cocky smirk on his face, which was mirrored by Chanel. "Oh, I don't mind beating you, after all, if you're too weak, then this plan won't work, now will it?" Chanel answered, swinging her sword in a downward slash, which Naruto blocked with the hand guard. Once the blade was knocked away, he countered with a side slash which Chanel leapt back to dodge. "Don't worry about me, I learn fast, now show me everything you know," Naruto called, charging after the girl, who kept weaving around his swings, parrying the ones she couldn't avoid. "I don't care how fast you learn. I've been training for 6 years, and you can't just learn all of that overnight, besides the fact that we use 2 different sword types," Chanel retorted, Naruto blocking a quick set of 5 slashes. "Huh, I'll make a deal with you, loser fixes dinner for the next week," Naruto said, holding his sword out as Chanel smiled, placing her tip against his as they charged at each other. "If you think that's enough to make me forfeit, then you'll have to try a different tactic," Chanel answered, leaping into the air as she buzzsawed, bringing her sword down on Naruto's, only for the blonde to dive to the side, stabbing backwards, using the curve of the blade to go under his arm. Chanel only managed to avoid it by hand-standing. "Are you saying my cooking is bad? Because no one else has ever complained," Naruto said as Chanel spun around, her sword flashing out at his, although he managed to block every hit. "I'm not saying anything except that I've had to cook for my dad ever since my sister was taken by that Marine. So don't try and convince me that a rugged sea rat like you can cook better than me," Chanel taunted as Naruto's face dropped, and for a second he vanished, reappearing over her head as he brought his sword down, Chanel bringing her sword up to block. "I prefer the term, sea fox actually. But whatever, we'll let our swords decide our fate," Naruto said, resuming his original stance with the sword extended. "I agree, let's," Chanel agreed, copying his stance as she leapt at him. "Wow, this is really good," Chanel said, shoveling the food into her mouth. Naruto eating at a much slower pace, Hidera looking at the pair with empathy. "Something the matter, old man? You not like your food?" Chanel asked, smiling at Hidera's soured look at the name. Turning to Naruto he pointed at him. "See what you've started, next thing you know, she'll be calling me old man all the time. And no, I like the food, it's just that you two seem so uncaring, Zhu. T sitting there eating stew and rice as if 2 days from now, we could all be dead. It's just nostalgic, remembering how I was before I was in so many battles, that I lost myself in the death. They saw. Why the best way to catch something is to get into its head, but what about when you can't distinguish between your thoughts and theirs? I think somewhere in the hunt for him, I started becoming him, making the choices he would. Fighting like him, only I'm not him, and so it's like comparing a match to a candle. Hedera explained, Naruto and Chanel sitting and paying rapt attention to the older male. Well, that's nice and all. But Hedera, I think you're confused. From what you've told me about him, he seems like a heartless mass murderer, but you don't seem all that intent on killing. Besides, there is key differences. You've just gotten so used to them that you don't notice them. You joined the Marines to catch him and stop people like him, but he just kept on doing what he was doing without any regards. Naruto said, steepling his fingers in front of his face as he grabbed up the plates, carrying them to the kitchen. So Hedera, why is it that you joined with Naruto? I mean He does have his moments of clarity where he seems like a proper captain. Chanel asked, pouring another saucer of sake for herself, offering the bottle to Hedera who turned it up, pouring half the contents into his mouth. Well, I suppose it would have to be when we fought. He beat me tactically, he may have been able to outright beat me, but he didn't. He proved himself capable of planning, as well as an ability to adapt. Exploiting any weakness he figured out, some that I was unaware of even. Not just that though, I just get this sense about him, like he has some great mission to complete, and as long as I don't try and stop him, he'll help me achieve any dream I have. To be honest, that's why I mentioned that he might have trouble during the rescue. Hedera admitted, Chanel's eyebrows rising in question. While he seems strong, and his is, don't get me wrong, he just always seems to be holding back slightly. However, he told me of any event that happened before I met him, about when he saved one of his brothers. They told him to stop fighting because he couldn't do anything about it, except he did. He exceeded his limits and did something they didn't think was possible. From that I deduced something about him, which I tested while he was sparring with you. Hedera said, pausing to take a breath as he heard Naruto putting the dishes back up. Anyways, he is strong normally. But when he's defending a precious person, he seems to push himself harder to exceed those limits, and more than that, when he feels like he's being underestimated, he doesn't hold back, because now he's not defending his safety. He's defending his honor and pride, and what's going to happen at that rescue is going to be a double dose. He's trying to save someone he likes, as well as trying to keep you happy. Plus he feels that he has to prove that he's not to be underestimated against anyone. Hedera finished, Naruto re-entering the room with 3 plates with cake on them. Setting them down, he went back to the kitchen for forks. And when his back was turned, he smiled, although neither Hedera nor Chanel were aware of it. In fact, I wonder how you beat Naruto. Sure, you have skill going for you. But he's rather resourceful in a pinch. Hedera said, just picking a piece of the cake as he placed it in his mouth. Well, he kinda did. I mean, first of all, it was a friendly spar, not an actual fight, and second, he did beat me. I just can't cook anything edible, so he volunteered to fix dinner anyways. Chanel said, giggling at Hedera's face as Naruto re-entered. Did you think I would lose that easily? I'm not, you old man. Naruto said, handing a fork to each of his friends as they dug into the cake. The next night, Chanel laid on the rooftop with Naruto, both of the young adults gazing at the stars overhead. I used to look at the stars with my mother, before Naruto trailed off, tracing the stars' invisible lines, creating constellations. Over there is Vulpinius the trickster. My mother said that it glowed the night I was born. In honor of that event, she named me Torikusuna no Kitsune in her native tongue, which is trickster fox. However, when I was younger, I could pronounce my name. So she renamed me Naruto, in honor of her father. When I got older, she told me about my old name, so I added it to my name, changing my middle initial to K for Kitsune. Naruto said, Chanel listening with a faint smile as she stared into the starry sky overhead. So your full name is Uzumaki K. Naruto? Chanel asked, giggling at Naruto nodding his head, only to hit it on the roof. Yep, now let's see. Over there to the southwest, that one was called the Snake and Hawk, because those stars formed a nesting bird in the middle, and just outside the constellation is a ECT ring of stars that resemble a snake wrapping around the bird, preparing to kill it. She told me that a great hero was once born in our village, and he sacrificed himself against a giant serpent to defend the village. The dead were so moved by his devotion to the village, even though he was exiled for being born on a day of bad luck, that they changed his spirit into a great bird, some say a hawk. which wrapped its talons around the snake and dragged it into the stars above, where it is eternally confined, always trying to get its revenge on the bird. Naruto said, his pitch rising and falling with the story as he got into it. Oh cool, what about that star over there? My father said that it glowed like a diamond when I was born. Chanel asked excitedly, looking at Naruto as he closed his eyes in thought. Opening them again, he looked up into the stars, tracing a path from the designated star. That's a part of Chanel, the Queen of Oblivion. She told me that story once, but it was a really long one. But I still remember it, and the excitement in her eyes when she told me it, and the dreams I dreamed that night. But it would be best if we did this another time, keep you interested of course. Naruto said, winking at Chanel as he dropped down from the roof, grabbing his sword as he began shadow sparring. By the way, I heard what Hidera said about me last night. Naruto said, not turning to face Chanel as he knew she was still on the roof. Oh, Chanel said questioningly, gazing at the stars overhead as she started making her own constellations. Yeah, but he got it mixed up. Actually a lot of it he got mixed up, but I can't blame him. First of all, while defending my honor is something very important to me, my precious people come first. Not only that, but I keep my word, I've never went back on a promise. Never planned to, so when I said we'd get your dad back, I meant even if I die, you will have him back. Naruto said, bringing his sword up as Chanel jumped off the roof, drawing her own sword in the process. Second, while I do fight harder when I feel underestimated, I can recognize the differences between arrogance, confidence, and just general caring for someone's well-being. What I never told him about that fight where my brothers told me I couldn't win, was that they knew I was willing to die to beat my opponent, and almost did. After the fight, I was in a coma for a week, with about half the bones in my body broken, and a punctured lung as well. Naruto said, parrying Chanel's first strike downwards, trying to stab her under the blade by using the curve of the blade. Chanel danced away, smiling at Naruto's half-hearted attempt. Third, I beat him because of something my mother taught me. It was a skill my dad taught her, and she taught me, I will likely teach either my mate or child when the time comes. My dad had the skill to look into a person's soul, their will, and see not the person they were, but who they would be, could be. I saw in Hidera's soul that he was looking for a way out, for someone to help him capture and or kill that person, and I saw the capability to do powerful things, with the right motivation. Naruto said, ducking under 3 quick thrusts by Chanel, who smiled kindly at Naruto, who smiled back, enjoying the light spar. By the same token, it's why I like you. When we met, you immediately held a sword to my throat. Disregarding the fact that my friend was injured, you have the ability to disregard anything that could make you underestimate your opponent. I like that. However, when you learned of your father's fate, you dropped the sword and tried to enlist not only my help, but my first mate, both of whom you threatened not moments earlier. You're willing to put away your emotions for what you feel is the right thing, Naruto said, matching Chanel blow for blow as the sparring picked up as both leapt at each other like hunting cats. No, not what I feel is right, to protect my precious people. Chanel corrected, rolling under a particularly close swipe by Naruto, who held up his hand to stop the spar as he wiped his brow, not breathing heavily in the least. Even better, those 2TNGs alone is what makes me want to do this, so I'm going to give you an option, a chance, to be part of my plan, my agenda. Naruto said, whispering his proposal in Chanel's ear as she smiled, nodding as Naruto and her shook hands. Marking the deal. The next morning the whole town was out, crowded around the village square to see the execution, not by choice but rather because they were threatened into it. On the platform was Chanel's dad, and by his side was Bridal, while perched on the roof was his second-in-command, her bow drawn with an arrow nocked as she sighted her target on the platform. Just in case something went wrong with Brindle. Okay, now that we're all gathered here, how about we get on with this execution? Brindle said, a sinister smile on his face. I would ask if the accused had any last words. But personally, don't think we should give criminals the chance to become martyrs, besides the fact that I'm not in the mood to hear some long-winded old man's final words just so I can kill him. So by the power vested in me by the Marine Corps, I sentence you to death. Brindle declared as he swung his pick at Chanel's dad's head, only for it to be stopped by a curved B. blade which hooked around the handle to stab into Brindle's forearm, blood staining the wood beneath his feet. Now how about you give her up before I'm forced to end your sad little midget life? Naruto taunted from underneath his hood as Brindle growled at him, swinging his pick at the blonde who smiled like an animal about to kill its prey. Wonderful, I was hoping you'd say that, Naruto said, parrying the pick as he pounced at Brindle. Naruto leapt at the dwarfish man, who rolled to the side, swinging his pick down on Naruto. Naruto was forced to grab the metal handle with one hand, swinging his sword with the other as he tried to swipe Brindle's feet. However, Brindle wasn't a vice admiral for nothing as he used armament Hokage to harden his legs as Naruto's blade skittered off with a clang. Then, Naruto blocked the pick with his sword, knocking the pick skywards as Naruto took the moment to retreat as he got in a defensive stance, his sword crossed across his body. Brindle didn't hesitate as he swung at Naruto, who batted the pick away with his sword. However, Brindle went with the motion, bring the opposite end of his pick up as Naruto barely avoided having his head caved in. Brindle kept spinning the double-ended pick like that, blocking any of Naruto's attacks. Finally, when Naruto darted forwards to try and break through his guard, Brindle swiped at Naruto, who backflipped to avoid the almost lethal attack. What didn't expect was for Brindle to throw the pick at him as it spun through air like a buzzsaw. Naruto just barely managed to bend at the knees as he landed, and duck beneath the pick. But his sword wasn't so lucky as the two weapons collided, sending Naruto's blade flying into a house, embedding in the stone. Brindle's pick was similarly thrown to the side as Naruto glanced at the house, weighing his chances of reaching the house without being picked off by Brindle. Brindle didn't give him the chance to even try as he charged the blonde, engaging him in a close-quarters fight. He gave a straight jab which Naruto ducked under, hammering two quick punches into the Marine's armpit. However, Brindle reacted with a swift kick which nailed Naruto in the chin, sending him flying as Brindle reinforced his hits with Hokage. Naruto flipped in midair, landing on his feet as he slid back several feet before he turned to the side, spitting out a glob of blood as he wiped his chin. He leapt at Brindle once more, this time actually managing to push his punch aside before sending a roundhouse punch into the dwarf's face, following up with a swipe of his left hand, his nails extending into claws as he dug 3 burrows across the Marine's cheek. Brindle countered with a knee to the gut, causing Naruto to double over before Brindle hit him with a two-handed uppercut. However, Naruto used his claws to dig into Brindle's arm as he leaned back from the hit, then head-butted the Marine, swiping at his throat with his claws, only for the Marine to lean back from the headbutt, and therefore dodge the claws. Naruto advanced on him, determined to push his advantage while he had it as he continued pummeling Brindle with punches and swipes with his claws that littered his body with shallow cuts that would become irritating the longer the two fought. Then, Naruto threw his full weight into a punch that Brindle leaned to the side to dodge, grabbing Naruto's outstretched arm, pulling him closer as he brought him down on his knee, winding Naruto, before bringing his elbow down on the blonde's back. Naruto distinctly heard his back pop from that hit. He tried to get away, but Brindle just threw him to the ground, kicking him into the side several times as Naruto's ribs creaked, at least 2 cracking before Brindle grabbed him by the ankles, spinning him around and throwing him through the wooden wall of a building as Naruto crashed through several pieces of furniture. Naruto looked around the room he was in, seeing shattered bits of wood, some sticking out of his body. He groaned as he stood, steadying himself on a wobbly table which looked to be standing only by a miracle as Naruto spotted several thick glass mugs and choice alcoholic beverages, noting this place as the town bar. Naruto turned around to find his opponent, only to find his hands on his shoulder as the dwarf grabbed a mug full of beer as he smashed the mug on Naruto's head. Fragments of glass embedding themselves in the blonde's head, blood leaking down his face. Naruto swayed with a low growl as his canines elongated, and he sunk his new fangs into Brindle's shoulder, blow. Flooding his mouth as he growled like a wild animal, his eyes glowing an evil reddish-black mixture as his hair began to bristle. Chanel rolled to the side as 2 arrows clattered against the ground behind her, the cat-like Marine running after her as she tried to pin Chanel down long enough to get a clean shot. Chanel was just barely managing to stay ahead of the woman's shots, when one sliced past her midsection, cutting her smooth skin as blood leaked from the wound. Chanel wasn't given any time to check the wound as 3 more arrows whizzed past, sinking into the wood of the surrounding buildings like a hot knife into butter. Chanel leapt behind a lamp post as 2 more arrows sunk into the wood with dull thunks. Chanel breathed heavily as she used the cloth of her shirt to blot the wound, just one of several on her body. Cutesy of the bow using marine. Chanel breathed deeply, steeling her nerves as she drew steel, charging the woman who launched another arrow which Chanel blocked. Ed with her sword as she swung at the woman who jumped back, planting her feet on a wall as she jumped onto a rooftop, smirking at Chanel. Chanel grimaced back as she ran at the building, using the MUSCLES in her legs as she jumped onto an adjacent roof, before leaping over the gap and re-engaging the catty woman, who pulled a solid iron arrow that was easily 3 times the size of a normal arrow. She blocked Chanel's first strike, the sword bouncing off the arrow as she tried to stab Chanel, who wove around the rapid thrusts. Chanel finally leapt back out of her reach as she tried to catch her breath very quickly. She wasn't given a chance as the woman advanced on her, intent on pushing her advantage. However, her next thrust was parried upwards as Chanel slid under her swing, swinging low as the Marine jumped over the swing. The next attack was a kick which sent the woman into the air. However, she flipped over, bringing her arrow down point first as Chanel fell backwards, blocking the point with the flat of her blade, supporting it with both her hands as he tried to push the woman off of her. Her feet kicked out uselessly as the sword was pushed against her neck, cutting off her supply of air as her vision began darkening. The woman finally let up for a second as she aimed to finish off Chanel, giving the younger female barely time to think as she gulped down a breath, ing her head to the side as the woman stabbed downwards, her iron arrow sinking into the stone roof as Chanel pulled a small knife from her pocket, stabbing the barely 3-inch dagger into the Marine's thigh, eliciting a loud screech of pain. Chanel stood up quickly, taking advantage of the woman's momentary distraction. Dropping her sword, she wielded the dagger with some apprehension, feeling less confident in the smaller blade. However, the Marine fought through the pain as she turned on Chanel, swiping at her with anger in her eyes. Chanel ducked under the swing, rolling forwards as she stabbed the dagger into the back of the Marine's knee on her other leg, sending her to the ground as her legs couldn't support her weight anymore. Chanel rolled her over, sitting on her back with the dagger held to the back of the Marine's neck as she ordered her to surrender. Just wait until my uncle gets here, and then we'll see how confident you are," the Marine said as Chanel instinctively looked out to sea, spotting a battleship, the same battleship that was supposed to hold Vice Admiral Phoenix, the same battleship that Hedera had headed for. Mentally, she was wishing him luck, and praying for his survival. Hedera climbed over the edge of the Marine battleship, tossing his scythe on the deck as he crept to the door to the captain's quarters. Tightening his grip on the scythe, he barged into the room. However, instead of Vice Admiral Phoenix, he found a straw dummy, with a note nailed to it. "To whoever may read this note. We are aware that you've taken up occupancy on Smithy Island, and will be taking the correct actions to counter this move. Withhold no illusions that you can escape the full might of the world government, nor the power that I may wield against you. If one Vice Admiral should fall, he or she shall be elevated to a higher position, and replaced twofold. This was merely a test to see how you would react. This has been a warning. Next time we will advance on your forces with twice the might of last time. Be prepared. D.1651351358. What is this? A trap? A test?" Hedera wondered aloud before he noticed something off about the dummy. Grabbing the cloak it had on, he tensed up as he read the writing on the back, and realized why it looked so familiar. "This is my old coat that I wore, but how did they get their hands on it?" Hedera asked aloud, as if anybody was around to answer him as a strange sense of fear gripped his heart, and he hurried back to the small dinghy beside the boat. As he hurried back to the mainland, the coat clutched tight to his chest. Naruto growled through his full mouth as he bit harder on Brindle's shoulder. Brindle hissed in pain before battering Naruto's exposed face with more tankards which shattered, more glass fragments sticking into his flesh, alcohol splattering in his eyes as they began burning. He opened his mouth in a howl of pain as his mouth and nose got longer, like a dog's snout. In addition, his EYs grew into slits that seemed to pierce straight into Brindle's soul. Brindle, however, wasn't intimidated by the beast-like appearance of Naruto as he grabbed a chair leg, smashing it into Naruto's snout. the fox-human hybrid growling in anger. Brindle tried to hit him again, only this time Naruto was ready as Hit grabbed the wooden leg with his mouth, biting clean through it as he spit out the ball of wood into Brindle's face. Groping around, the blonde grabbed the edge of a table as he swatted Brindle away, throwing the table after him as it shattered into wooden splinters on impact. Brindle had barely enough time between hitting the wall and the table hitting him to use Haki to harden his body. He almost sighed in relief before the bestial Naruto pounced on him, slicing his skin to ribbons with his claws and tearing out small chunks of flesh with his fangs. Finally, Brindle managed to grab a metal pipe from the plumbing, most likely enhancing it with Haki as he battered Naruto with Hit until the pipe was bent out off shape, and Naruto was whimpering on the floor. Brindle took the chance to run outside, grabbing his pick as he barely managed to get it up in time to block Naruto's jaws, which would have clamped around his neck. As it was, he saw the fangs sinking into the metal as he tried to harden it with Haki, until from Naruto to smirk through the bite, his fangs glowing brightly as Brindle recognized the use of Haki. Then, he planted his foot between Naruto's legs as he put all his strength into the kick as Naruto released the pick, screaming in agony as he whirled around, his jaws slavering as they snapped at air. Finally, he managed to push through the pain as he tossed off his shirt and hood as his hair grew down to his waist, covering his body, two fox ears popping out of his head, and a long, luxurious blonde tail sprouted from just below the top of his pants. Naruto crouched down, tensing his new leg muscles as he went off like a shot at Brindle, who swung his pick with a minor degree of fear in his eyes, his breath coming in ragged gasps as Naruto hit the ground in a crater. But Brindle didn't leave it at that as he swung the pick around, hitting Naruto with the side as he growled, forcing himself to his feet as his breath came out in low growls as he tried to get a hold on his anger. However, Brindle didn't want to give him the chance as he swung the pick from underhand as it went upwards, through Naruto's armpit and out of his shoulder. Brindle felt confident that the fight was over then. Naruto just growled louder, grabbing the middle portion of the pick as his hands became wreathed in fire, melting the metal. With that done, Naruto's new tail came around, swatting Brindle away into a stone wall which cracked from the impact. Then, Naruto grabbed the handle of the pick embedded in his shoulder as he pulled it out, throwing it at Brindle as it spun through the air, smashing into the stone wall with enough force to shatter it, littering the ground as Brindle tossed it up, batting it at Naruto, who either swatted the projectiles with his tail, or threw fireballs which melted the small pieces of stone. Brindle finally the idea that the pieces of stone weren't enough as he grabbed both pieces of his trusty pick, swinging with around like scythes, which was a mistake considering Naruto's first mate used a scythe, therefore he knew how to dodge the swings. Naruto rolled under one swing as the fur along his body retreated, however, the hair still bristled and he still retained the majority of his fox-like qualities, such as his tail, which shot up to wrap around the handle of one of the picks as it pulled it free from Brindle's weakening grip. Naruto's tail swung the pick around, knocking his other pick skyward as it clobbered him, knocking his breath out as he reeled backwards. Next, his tail threw the pick at the other piece, sending both halves clattering across the ground as he advanced on the gasping Brindle. Naruto dug his claws into the marine's collar as he lifted him up, and began pummeling his face and body with punch after punch, his face starting to resemble raw meat by this point as Naruto threw him across the ground, his fat body bouncing as he crashed into another wall. Naruto advanced slowly, his sword in hand from where he had retrieved it as it looked at the pitiful marine beneath him as he flipped his grip on the sword, sheathing it as he grabbed Brindle by the neck, his grip growing tighter by the second as Brindle flopped around like a dying fish, which was pretty close to his current situation. I considered slitting your throat, stabbing you in the back, even crucifying you, but I've decided I'm going to take that coat, and I don't want any of you filthy blood on it. So I'm going to strangle you. And watch you as the life leaves your pitiful little eyes. Naruto said, the first words spoken since they had started fighting. Brindle's only response was to lift his hand, and with great effort as his oxygen ran out, was to lift the middle finger. Naruto had a sick thought as he released him, and snapped his finger off, forcing the digit down his throat as he kneed him in the face once more, before using both hands to grab his neck, squeezing the last vestiges of life out of his body. Finally, after several minutes, and once Brindle had stopped shaking, Naruto let him go. His body limp as it fell to the ground. Naruto grabbed the edge of his coat with a sick sense of satisfaction, pulling out from under his body as it came off with little resistance. Little to no damage or staining from the fight, which surprised Naruto. As he stood, he looked to the sun as it seemed to shine a little brighter. Days later, Naruto placed several plates with cake in front of Hidera, Chanel, and her father. He had to remember to thank Hanabi later for her contribution to the dessert. The group dug into the cake, hemming at the rich, creamy texture. "It's great, Captain. Now if only everything else you cooked tasted this good," Chanel said as she giggled, Hidera inhaling the food down like he was starving, but who could blame him? If all the occupants of tea table ever got to taste was this cake, they could still die happy. "Hey, I do cook decent meals, it's just that I have a medical condition that requires me to have high levels of sugar in my body, so I have an affinity for sweets, sorry," Naruto said, pouting, although he could tell Chanel was just kidding with him. After all, she was always the first one done at dinner each night. Naruto remembered how Chanel's dad had offered to teach him barbecuing in return for helping his daughter and rescuing him. So, how about we address the current issue? A marine battleship just appeared out of nowhere, with no crew. And we are in need of a ship if we ever hope to get anywhere. Chanel and her dad could do some modifications to the ship, but this could be a trap, Naruto said as he switched into captain mode, his face growing serious as he contemplated each option. "It will take about 1 year to do all the modifications I'd want to do," Chanel said, and Naruto's sweat dropped. "Fine, I suppose we could relax for a while anyway. Besides, I'm not comfortable taking the villagers' money just because we got rid of a tyrant, so I have to think of a way to earn an honest berry," Naruto said, leaning back in the chair. "Okay. Then it's settled, we set sail in a year," Naruto said, grabbing his new marine coat, which he had dyed orange, and had Hanabi re-stitch the words on the back to read, "Freedom," instead of, "Justice." "I'm coming ace, and Luffy won't be far behind me. And I haven't forgotten my promise to avenge your death, Sabo, just wait, Grand Line, I'm coming for you," Naruto said determinedly as he pulled out his sword. Shadow sparring as he vowed to get stronger. His mind already formulating new ideas for attacks. Naruto sighed as he floated through the water, the only thing separating him from certain doom. A wooden raft. He leaned his head back as he relaxed, his body loosening its death grip on the soul ore. It had been 2 years since he and Hidera had landed on Smithy Island and almost a year since they'd set sail. His ship was magnificent, with a full-stocked weapons system, kitchen, even a blacksmith's forge had been included for Chanel, who had taken it upon hers elf to manage the massive beast of a ship. They'd adventured for the past 9 or 10 months, occasionally going into the Grand Line, before Naruto had received a report, via his special contraption. They had discovered a transceiver within the mast, and Naruto had rigged it around so he could transmit messages to islands with transceivers built on them. That had taken another month out for them to build a tower on Smithy Island. Not to mention they'd discovered that they could piggyback on marine communications, given the weather and other factors working in their favor. How did they manage to pay for all this shitzel? Well, Naruto had taken up a very useful career in his past time, writing books. Popular books, even best-selling books which had earned him a net worth bordering on 1 billion beris, of course. The majority of that had went to paying for the ship and radio tower. He carried around 400 to 500 million beris at any given time on his ship. Which brought him to his current problem. He had heard a report over the marine airwaves that his brother Luffy had been spotted at a marine base about 2 weeks ago. Naruto had set sail on his own, planning on catching up to his brother by intercepting him. However, a storm had split him off from Chanel and Hidera. He had had just enough time to tell them to meet him at Primary Island, the first island in the Grand Line, located at the bottom of Reverse Mountain. He'd planned to just hitch a ride with his brother. Yep, smart move Naruto, except he was pretty much stranded at sea currently, following only a star map for guidance. He thanked God for those years of star watching with his mother. His look had changed slightly over the past year. He'd incorporated the stolen marine coat, now dyed orange with the kanji for freedom on the back. It was surprisingly warm. Also, He'd foregone wearing shirts while in fair weather, preferring to feel the sun on his bare skin, which had caused it to reach a golden tan which complemented his sun-kissed blonde locks. A golden zero hung on a gold chain around his neck, adding to the sun god look which girls seemed to swoon over. A pair of cream-colored loose cloth pants, and black combat boots completed the look. His sword, named Kitsuneteru. Perhaps the most out-of-place thing about his looks was his hat. A navy blue top hat sat on his head, with 2 fox ears sewn into the brim. On each side to make it appear that his fox ears were poking through the brim, the hat his version of Ace's tattoo to remember Sabo. Naruto closed his eyes for just a second when he came to a jarring stop. Blinking his eyes, he rubbed them free of the accumulated sleep. Looking around, he saw a small ship next to him, banked in the sand of an island. Looking past that, he saw a large ship with the figurehead of a black cat. It appeared to be docked in the sand. Naruto blinked for a few seconds, looking very owlishly at the ship as people poured over the side. He suddenly remembered to pull his earplugs as sound flooded his ears, the sounds of battle. Yawning, he clambered over the side of his boat, landing with a splash in the shallows that made him irritated, especially when he had to kick his feet to get the clinging sand off. "Hey boss, there's a ship over here with a bunch of treasure." Naruto heard a voice from the boat next to him, and saw a man exit the boat, most likely expecting his captain. Instead, he got a swift kick to the leg, and a punch to the face. His body splashed in the water as it bounced across the waves like a stone, 6, 7, 8 times before he sunk below the surface. "Woo, new record," Naruto said excitedly, and started T-jump, only to find a large group of pirates dressed up as various cats. Naruto had the increasing urge to sweat drop as they stared at him. "Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt your cosplay game or whatever it is that a bunch of men do when they're dressed up as cats," Naruto said as a man forced his way to the front, dressed like someone without any fashion sense. "Who are you? Just hand over the treasure, and no one has to get hurt," the man said, pulling out a chakram on a string, the metal ring swaying back and forth. Naruto felt compelled to follow its path. "Name's Naruto, and it isn't my treasure to give away. Although, I suppose on that same note, I should keep you from getting it. After all, you look like a decent bunch of losers to test my new technique on. Okay, just let me," Naruto, leaping over the group as he landed on some heads, jumping off of them as he landed on a rocky slope. "Okay, now then," Naruto said, arching his back as he focused on the feeling within himself. He exhaled, let loose with a loud, echoing howl which set the villagers' nerves on edge, from several miles away. However, it had a different effect on the pirates in front of Naruto as their eyes widened before rolling into the back of their heads as the collective lot fainted in a giant heap in rows like dominoes. "Yep, demonic howl always gets 'em," Naruto said, before he heard footsteps behind him, running towards his position from the forest. Naruto turned slowly, hoping that it wasn't someone who could actually give him trouble. What he found was a teenage boy with curly hair and a long nose, bent at the waist, his hands on his knees as he tried to get his breath. "Fear not, the great Usopp has arrived," the boy said, Naruto finally letting the sweat drop roll down his face at the great Usopp. The boy stood up suddenly, drawing his slingshot as he spotted Naruto, who placed a finger at his mouth. "Shish, I was never here," Naruto said before he used his speed to vanish at superhuman speeds, moving to a high branch in a nearby tree. The boy looked around frantically, and Naruto snickered at the sight before a girl exited the forest. Naruto breath caught in his throat, the figure was exquisite. Her red hair shined in the sunlight, making her head look like it was on fire. His hand darted out as he caught her, pressing his lips to her side as he opened his mouth, and promptly devoured the apple whole, chewing for a few seconds as he spit out the core and stem. Looking at the girl beside Usopp, he noticed how her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath, leaning on a quarterstaff which she had produced from her bosom. He felt his cheek heat up as he shook his head, dispelling the thoughts as he watched from overhead. "Look, I really did see a wolf, Nami," Usopp insisted, describing Naruto to Nami under the tree. Nami, however, didn't believe him, or that he insisted that he'd already defeated all of the pirates invading. Suddenly, she pushed Usopp aside and hurried down the slope as she shoved unconscious pirates out of her way as she made a beeline for the tiny boat with the treasure. Mentally, Naruto was bouncing around pointing at a scoreboard that read, Naruto 1, Pirates 0. Then, two more people shot out of the trees, one of them that Naruto recognized as his brother Luffy, who promptly yelled at Usopp for misleading them. You idiots, north isn't the direction that's coldest. Nami yelled, hitting both Luffy and his companion over the head, a bump rising from their HEA. DS despite the fact that Luffy's head is made of rubber, and therefore shouldn't be hurt by blunt force attacks. Again, it was an angry female, and those seemed to be nearly as powerful as Hokage-infused fists. Naruto didn't look forward to the day when he met a female capable of using Hokage-infused punches. Then, the group's chattering was broken up as a man appeared from the forest, a gym bag in hand as he dropped it, pushing his glasses up on his nose. Well, it would appear I severely overestimated Django's crew. I expected at least some of you to be a bit winded. Oh well, good help is so hard to find these days. I'll just have to kill you, and Lady Kaya, and frame you for her death. The man, a butler as would appear, said, nodding to himself as he unzipped the gym bag, pulling out a pair of fuzzy gloves with katana blades attached to the tips, like cat claws. That's an interesting design, some flaws of course, but nothing a little thought won't correct. Naruto mumbled to himself as he began forming the designs in his mind, intending to send word to Chanel later with the schematics. Naruto heard a resounding clang, and looking down, he saw that Luffy had broken one of the claws, proving Naruto's point about some design flaws. That Luffy had broken one of his claws seemed to infuriate the butler as he dashed at Luffy. The speed was mildly impressive to Naruto, and Luffy apparently, as he clubbed him across the cheek, sending him flying through the air as he righted himself, sliding back several feet. Just then, a young woman came out of the forest, breathing heavily as she coughed, alerting the assembled group of pirates. Kaya, what are you doing here? Usopp asked, running to her side as he supported her as she struggled to catch her breath. Klahadore, he tried to kill Mary. I have to find out why. Kaya yelled, somehow getting the air to yell despite the fact she was still struggling for breath. The butler, now named Klahadore, turned to the girl adjusting his glasses as they cracked, one of the lenses fracturing beyond repair. This too, infuriated him as he started towards Kaya, only for the girl to pull out a gun, pointing it at Klahadore. Now Lady Kaya, put the gun down. And we can talk, Klahadore said calmly. Naruto had to admit that much. Klahadore had practiced for years with appeasing this girl, and it showed in how he spoke to placate the young woman. No, tell me now, why did you try and kill Mary, and why did he say you were a pirate captain? Kaya asked, waving the gun around as Usopp had to duck under her swings or be clubbed across the face. Klahadore sighed. Because it's true, Lady Kaya. I had planned to have you will everything to me, and then we would blame this pirate attack for your death. I used to be famous. The Captain Kuro of the Black Cat Pirates. I won't have my well-laid plan ruined by a band of sea ruffians, and a village liar. Kuro said, his voice turning cold as he ran at Kaya in a burst of speed. Kaya reacted as most people would, and fired the gun, which missed as Kuro was moving erratically. Kaya's mouth opened in a scream as Kuro almost slashed her. In fact, he got close enough Kaya could have reached out and plucked his glasses off his nose had she been quick enough, before Luffy's rubber arm wrapped around his neck and pulled him away from the young heiress, throwing him down the slope as he once again righted himself, landing on his feet like his crew's namesake. No, I won't let you hurt the nice lady, she's Usopp's friend. If you want to hurt her, you'll have to get past me. Luffy declared, and Naruto looked at his crew, who seemed unconcerned with their captain, staying out of his fight. That's not to say they didn't shout encouragements to the rubber pirate captain. Haha, too easy, Kuro said as his body went limp, and he seemed to fade out of vision as his speed seemed to double. Still, Naruto wasn't worried. After all, Chanel could move about that fast a year ago. And Naruto had no thoughts that Luffy would be beaten that easily. Naruto was right as Luffy punched to the side, seemingly at nothing, only to nail Kuro in the face as he sent him flying into the stone walls either side of the slope. Then, he wrapped his body around Kuro's, stretching his neck back as far as it would go. Now you can't run away. Gum gum bell, Luffy shouted as he head-butted Kuro with all his strength. sending the annoying black cat captain into unconsciousness. Luffy slowly stood up, before declaring his victory to the heavens. Yep, that's Luffy, just the same as he used to be. If a little stronger, Naruto said, leaning backwards as he hung upside down from the tree branch, before shifting his weight as he flipped through the air, landing on his feet as he dusted himself off. Wonderful job, Luffy, nice to see that you may actually amount to something, and that me and Ace won't have to be saving you all the time. Naruto said as he approached his adoptive brother. Only to be blocked by Luffy's band of merry pirates. I'd ask you to kindly move, but something tells me you won't, so Naruto trailed off as he tensed his legs, running through the group without much trouble. In fact, the only real trouble he got was when Luffy tackled him to the ground. Hey Luffy, nice to see you too. I don't suppose you could do a brother a favor? Naruto asked. Hey Luffy, you know this guy? That's the guys I saw, the wolf. The girl, and moss-haired man asked, Usopp shouting and gesturing at Naruto. It's a fox, woodpecker. Naruto shouted back, gesturing. At Usopp, who began fighting with Naruto, Naruto not resorting to his powers, or really even fighting back. Yeah, this is Naruto, my brother. Luffy said, smiling his signature smile that seemed to make the world a brighter place to live. A few moments passed. Brother. Naruto sighed as he leapt around the kitchen of the Going Merry, a chibi version him preparing food to feed his current transport system. He grabbed a knife off the counter, dicing up the fish as he dropped it into a cooking pot full of broth. It had been about a week since they had left Syrup Island, and Lady Kaya had offered them the ship they were currently sailing across the ocean to Reversal Mountain. Naruto had offered up payment for his passage in the form of culinary support, considering the crew didn't have anyone trained in the culinary arts. Before they'd left, Naruto had sent word to Chanel via Seagull Mailing Corp. He expected the return package within the next few days, provided that SGMC were as good as people made them out to sound. Looking out the door, Naruto could see Nami looking at a map, and Luffy and Usopp playing with the ship's cannon. Naruto smiled at the girl and reached to the side for something. Only to feel a small tickling on his hand. He froze, turning slowly as he saw it, the biggest, fuzziest spider that ever existed, as he screamed like a girl. The crew rushed into the kitchen, well Luffy, Nami, and Usopp did. Zoro was probably up in the crow's nest asleep, lazy swordsman. At least he wasn't totally hopeless in regards to his swordsmanship. In pure swordsmanship, he was about Naruto's level. But Naruto never fought with just swords. He had fire, extreme speed, an opposable tail, and the ability to turn into a demonic fox. No to mention his sword's little skill. Anyways, back to the crew rushing into the kitchen, only to see Naruto clinging to the ceiling. The knife that was in his hand was stuck to the hilt in the roof, with Naruto clinging to it as if the ocean was underneath him. He pointed to the spider as it ran across the floor. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention Naruto has an intense irrational fear of spiders. Luffy said as they picked up the tiny spider, only about the size of a grain of rice. You would too if you had almost been eaten by that thing. Naruto hissed at him, glaring at the spider as if it would suddenly catch on fire. Besides, do you want spiders in your food? Because let me tell you, spider doesn't taste like fish, or chicken, or beef, or any other kind of meat. Naruto hissed down to his brother as Luffy stared at the little spider before popping it into his mouth. Nami ran to the porthole, gagging out of it as Luffy chewed the spider carefully. Suddenly, his eyes got wide as a little spider was seen running on the inside of them, and his eye turned into sparkles. More, Luffy demanded as Naruto began throwing empty cans at the bottomless pit. No, now go away or no dinner for you, and don't think I can't keep it from you. I'll eat your portion and my own. Go back outside and play with your cannon. Naruto ordered, still used to ordering his brother around despite the fact that he was a guest on Luffy's ship. Regardless, Luffy followed orders when food was threatened, Usopp following him out. Naruto slowly descended from the roof as he walked over to Nami, patting her back as she continued gagging out of the window. It's okay, I understand. Naruto assured the red-headed navigator. If you like, you can stay in here with me, the lighting's better for your skin, and I could use the company. Naruto offered as Nami vomited outside. And Naruto couldn't suppress the grin that broke his face. Tell me Naruto, how did you end up finding Luffy when he was on the move like that? Nami asked, pulling her head back into the kitchen. Although it was still slightly green. Naruto searched the stores for something before offering her a white bar of something. She looked at it with confusion. Bite into it and suck, it helps with the aftertaste. Marine cadets are given one to help them get used to being at sea. Naruto explained as she bit into the bar, which was spongy as she sucked on it, groaning quietly as a sweet liquid flooded her mouth. Going back to preparing dinner, Naruto struck up a conversation with Nami. In regards to your question, as I was growing up, my mother used to sit up at night and we'd look at the stars together. She taught me all the traditional constellations, and the Uzumaki constellations. Uzumaki constellations? Nami asked, releasing the bar for a moment before biting back into it. Oh yeah, you don't know. My full name is Naruto K. Uzumaki. Everyone on my home island had the last name Uzumaki, we were all family. Anyways, we were named according to the constellation the night we were born. Mine was Vulpinius the Trickster. Naruto said, and Nami looked intrigued by learning about Naruto's past. Could you maybe tell me mine? Nami said, smiling as she batted her eyes at Naruto, who blushed. Turning back to the soup, playing it off as the heat of the kitchen. Not right now, we'd have to wait for a clear night. Besides, you'd have to know which stars were lit up the night of your birth. That's not something most people know. Naruto said, looking back to Nami, and for that moment, when she wasn't paying attention to him, he could see her inner turmoil. Hey, don't worry. It will have to get darker before the dawn can break, but I have a feeling that this dawn will be one of the most beautiful ones ever. I promise. Naruto added, and he smiled when he saw the faintest rosy covering of Nami's cheek. I bet you tell all the girls you meet that. Nami said, swallowing the bar which she'd finally consumed fully. Do you have another one? Nami asked. Naruto smiled, I will soon. That's sponge cake, our dessert for tonight. Naruto said, rummaging around as he placed a giant pan into the oven. Well, I tend not to bet, but I can say I never break my promises. Naruto said. And before he could say anything else, a man's voice cut through the conversation as Nami rushed outside, leaving Naruto alone. Yutsukushi hai kokura, Naruto mumbled under his breath as Nami ran back inside. Asking for limes as Naruto kicked open a drawer filled with various citrus fruits. Scurvy? He asked as Nami nodded, grabbing a few limes as she ran out of the kitchen, Naruto following slowly as he left his soup to simmer. I'm okay. One of the two strange men cheered as he and his partner started dancing the can-can. Luffy looked excited, although Luffy rarely looked anything but. Now hold on. You aren't better just yet, you need to let your body heal. Nami insisted as the two men continued dancing until the formerly injured one collapsed. See, I told you. Nami said, fulfilling her role of, women are always right. Unfortunately, when the man collapsed, he scattered wanted posters across the deck, identifying the two as bounty hunters. Naruto would have weeded that they'd recognize him, except they didn't distribute his wanted posters in any of the blues. Nami picked up one of the wanted posters, her face dropping at the face on the paper. She looked around to make sure no one had seen her as she tucked the poster into her shirt. Lucky piece of paper. Hey, do you have a cook on board? One of the bounty hunters asked, and the crew immediately pointed at Naruto, who leaned over the railing, his sword bumping lightly against the railing. I suppose that's me, but I'm just hitching a ride for a while. Naruto said, hoping that the bounty hunter would request someone else's help. No such luck. Okay, I don't suppose you could fix something for my buddy to help him recover quickly? The bounty hunter asked, and Naruto almost jumped ship to get away from the hopeful look on his face. I could, his face lifted, provided we had enough resources, which we don't because someone broke into the meat locket last night. Luffy sneezed. The bounty hunter's face fell before a light bulb went off over his head. That's fine, there's a good restaurant in the area, the Barati. The bounty hunter said, apparently hoping that they'd carry him to the place. Hey look, we have somewhere to go and, Nami was interrupted by Naruto and Luffy. No, we need to get a permanent chef for you guys, I won't be around forever to fix food for you, one of you needs to at least learn how to cook a decently nutritious meal. Naruto said, and Luffy agreed. Besides, it's our fault that his friend is hurt, we owe him. Luffy whined, and Naruto wondered how he ever managed to collect 3 members of a crew by himself. Their trip to the restaurant went mostly without incident, other than Luffy fell overboard and they had to fish him out. It took around 5 hours sailing without wind to reach the Baratie, which was floating on the ocean and resembled a big tuna fish. Really, this is a famous place? Naruto asked, and Nami looked like she shared the th. Ota's Johnny and Yosaku assured them of the Baratie's legitimacy. Luffy really didn't care since the boy's nose picked up the smell of cooking meat somehow over the smells of the sea. Zoro was once again taking a nap, but this time on the side of the deck, while Usopp fiddled with making more stars for his slingshot. Then, as they started to dock at the Baratie, Nami spotted a marine ship. It looked to have just docked, and marines were milling around on the deck as they tied off, several marines dropping a stairway as another marine walked down the stairs, a lady in resplendent evening wear on his arm. He spotted the Going Merry, motioning for the lady to go on without him as he shouted to them. "You there, I haven't seen that prate flag before. That's because we just got a ship and flag a week ago." Luffy shouted back, his signature grin on his face. "Ah, well then, you won't have a bounty. On orders of Lieutenant Full Body, surrender or face the might of the Marines." "Sink 'em boys," Full Body shouted to the other Marines, marking him as a higher rank as he walked off to catch up with his date. The Marines didn't even give them the chance to cease before they took aim, lighting the fuse on the cannon. Luckily, Luffy had a plan, which went wrong when the cannonball hit him and was sent flying into the upper levels of the Baratie. "Luffy, I thought you said you had a plan," Naruto yelled, punching his brother across the face as he was sent into the hole he'd made, crashing inside. "Well, hopefully he can repay the damages, and won't have work it off for some crap," Naruto said, and then clamped a hand over his mouth. "Effin' Murphy's Law," Naruto complained as he hopped over the side, the rest of the crew following suit while the bounty hunters offered to stay behind and guard the ship. Why the marine didn't attack them again, Naruto didn't care enough to learn. Entering the Baratie, the crew immediately saw Full Body being held up by his neck by someone dressed in a double-breasted dinner jacket. His blonde hair retaining a slight bit of grease, probably from kitchen work. One eye was covered by the hair, which bothered Naruto in how good the man's depth perception was with one eye. "Now don't waste food again, or else," the man threatened, only for another man to appear and grab the blonde's arm, causing him to release Full Body, who crumpled to the floor before crawling away like a dog with its tail between its legs. "Sanji, you can't just do that to every guy that wastes a little food. A restaurant's customers are its lifeblood," the man said, and Sanji, the blonde, shrugged him off as he began picking up the pieces of the bowl that Full Body had broken. "If that's true, then the food is oxygen. When the blood starts wasting oxygen, it needs to be removed," Naruto said, walking towards the blonde and his fellow worker. Nami started to follow, but Naruto heard a low rumbling and jumped back, tackling her to the floor with a cry of, "Look out." Luffy then fell through the roof, groaning as he tried to lift the pieces of ceiling off of him. He never got the chance as Naruto and Nami cumulatively started kicking him. Usopp and Zoro just shrugged their shoulders, heading for a table where they fell into the chairs, Zoro ordering some sake, Usopp, some fancy steak. But I don't want to stay here, Nami. Can't I please have more food, Naruto?" Luffy said, little canaries circling his head as he fell into unconsciousness. "Well, that should teach him. Now to figure out what Luffy owes the guy who owns this place." Naruto mumbled as he looked around. He decided to ask Sanji. He opened his mouth to ask, only for Sanji to fly by him with hearts in his eyes as he dropped to one knee in front of Nami. Naruto felt annoyance overcome him as he stalked towards the blonde. "Oh, what a noble thing I must have done to have earned the presence of such a beautiful angel. May I ask thy name, dearest maiden?" Sanji said, but before Nami could answer, Naruto shoved between the two. "You may not, you pervy blonde cook. Now leave Nami alone or else." Naruto threatened the blonde, growling his intimidation. Sanji growled back as they butted head, sparks flying between them and flames of righteous anger flaring up behind them. Nami suddenly appeared, hitting them both over the head as they broke apart, Sanji swooning over Nami's lovely fists, Naruto smiling foolishly. "Nami's hit hurt so good," they both exclaimed, then blinked at each other before resuming shoving heads as the sparks and flames resumed. I give up, Nami said, throwing her hands up as she went to join the rest of her crew, dragging Luffy behind her. Finally, the two cooks broke apart as an older man's voice interrupted their standoff. Where did that boy go? The man said. And as Naruto turned to look at him, sparkles filled his eyes, strangely reminiscent of his brother when seeing something cool. Red Leg Zeph, the famous pirate chef. You're on my top 5 pirates to meet on my adventure list. What boy might you is looking for? Naruto asked, his voice sweet, as if he were worshipping someone, which he was considering Zeph was one of Naruto's favorite pirates. Considering his infamy for cooking. A young boy with a straw hat, about yay tall, and broke my restaurant. Zeph said, coming down a spiraling staircase, his peg leg sounding out against the wood. Oh, you mean Luffy? He's over there. What does he owe you? Naruto had to ask, considering this was a necessary evil. He was just crossing his fingers that Zeph wouldn't mention work, of course. Naruto could offer to work in Luffy's place. 250 million berries. He ain't got that kind of money, so the brot's going to work it off here for a year. Zeph said, grabbing hold of Luffy as he tried to shake him awake. Naruto noticed that Sanji wasn't hanging all over Nami now that his boss was here. Haha, good luck with that. Naruto said, the situation amusing him. Zeph noticed his good nature, and raised an eyebrow. You were with him, I presume. Am I to assume you aren't going to leave him behind? Zeph asked, gesturing to Luffy, who was picking himself up, dusting off the plaster from the roof. That's right, of course. Asking Luffy to work for you is a horrible deal. Luffy would probably steal food, he has no balance, so he'd probably drop tons of dishes. Tell you what, if I work for you for a month, and get Sanji here to stop swooning over every lady that comes in here, we call it even. Naruto suggested, and Zeph looked between Luffy who collapsed across the table as Sanji began berating him for almost hitting Nami. And Naruto, who looked like a child about to receive a gift. Why would you offer that, besides the fact you get to leave quicker? What's supposed to convince me Hat you're better for the job than he is? Zeph asked, and Naruto smirked as he knew he had him in the trap. You mean besides the fact that I gain some actual cooking experience? I'm trained in food service, 3 years worth, sir. Course, I can't really cook much in the way of main courses, I prefer desserts. Anyways, I guarantee that it beats the option of my brother working for you. Naruto said, really trying to sell the case. And, as if to prove his point, Luffy dug into his nose, pulled out a booger and tried to sneak it into Zoro's drink, only for the moss-haired swordsman to force the drink down Luffy's throat. Fine. But only if you get Sanji to stop flirting with all the female patrons. Zeph said, returning up the stairs. Naruto started to salute, only for the doors to fly open, and a marine ran inside. He didn't get 10 foot before a shot rang out, and the marine went down, and a shadowed, gaunt figure walked through the doors, a gun hanging loosely, and smoking, from his finger as he fell into a chair. Laying the gun on the table. Where can a man get a decent meal around here? The man asked, and Naruto felt like trouble was coming. As it turned out, the situation was diffused rather easily by Patty knocking the man out and throwing him out on his face. The civilians dining in the restaurant cheered as if he had saved everyone. Honestly, the guy had a gun with a maximum of 4 bullets. And besides that, numerous people could have taken him out at any time, so there was no real danger to the civilians to begin with. The guy only wanted some food after being left to starve to death. It didn't sit well with Naruto, letting some guy, even one who had previously been waving a gun around, to starve. It was only by the pure luck that he hadn't starved back in the jungle. But it wasn't Naruto's place to question as he was currently loaded down under no less than 17 plates which he somehow managed to balance perfectly across his body as he flitted around the room, delivering orders. There were other servers, but apparently Zeph had given them all permission to take the day off and let Naruto handle it. Well, Naruto wasn't going to complain to one of his idols. Dropping the last plate off, he noticed Sanji slipping out the side door, carrying several plates of food. Glancing around, he stalked after his fellow blonde chef, peeking out the door as he saw him speaking to the starving escaped prisoner from earlier. Here, eat it, or you'll die. I can't just give it to someone else now, can I? Sanji said, leaning against the railing, puffing on his cig. Alright, as the man looked at him with tears in his eyes, before scarfing down the meal as Sanji watched with a small smile. Hey, that's a really nice thing you did, Luffy said, suddenly popping into the scene. Sanji looking up at the upper floor at the Straw Hat Pirate. Join my crew. I'm going to travel the Grand Line, and become the Pirate King, Luffy declared, causing Naruto to facepalm. Let it be known that Luffy never learned the definition of subtlety. Can't, I have something I need to do here, Sanji responded, reaching down as the man choked, finally taking a breath as he had finished licking the plates clean. To lift the plates up and toss them over the railing into the ocean. The Grand Line, you don't want to go there. My captain thought he was ready for the Grand Line, but we didn't even last a few days before our whole fleet was destroyed by this crazy powerful guy. Your small-time crew won't stand a chance, the man yelled, Luffy ignoring his accusations as he stared down Sanji, who likewise ignored Luffy. Heading back in as he opened the door to find Naruto watching him expressionlessly. What do you want? Sanji asked irritably as he brushed past the part-timer. Personally, I would have gone with more curry, and less rice. And a piece of bread never hurt anyone, Naruto observed as Sanji paused, turning back to look at the blonde with a small degree of recognition. However, the moment passed as quickly as it came, and Sanji frowned. Well, it wasn't you, now was it? He said, re-entering the kitchen as Naruto sighed, before heading towards the person calling his name. Who just so happened to be his favorite redhead discluding. So, Mr. Big Man on deck is working off Luffy's debt as a lowly busboy, huh? Should I leave a big tip? Nami asked, smiling faintly as Naruto snorted. Glancing to the side as Luffy as devouring multiple dishes at once, Zoro attempting to use his loaf of bread as a pillow, Usopp possibly the most well-mannered of the trio as he methodically sliced a steak into identical pieces. Nah, keep your berries, you need them more than me, and besides, I've got a plan. Naruto whispered under his breath as he saw a waiter pass by. Nami smiled, who said it was my berries. Naruto smiled at her joke, before a knowing smile replaced it. Well, Luffy's broke as a joke, Usopp's wallet has been swiped so many times already, I wouldn't be surprised if it was full of and Zoro is a pathological borrower and probably owes God knows how much in debts. So it would probably be your berries funding my escape, so I feel inclined to info. You that if you wanted to spend more time with me, all you had to do was ask. Naruto informed the redhead, whose cheeks lit up to match her hair as she looked away, Naruto chuckling under his breath as he walked away to clear a table. And so it continued for several more hours, until Zeph appeared in the kitchen as Naruto was collecting dishes for customers. As he was waiting, he couldn't help but overhear the conversation going on between the proprietor and his fellow blonde chef. So you're telling me several dishes just vanished into thin air? I might expect this from one of the junior chefs, or filet fry. The aforementioned chef popping up from inside a giant tuna, before returning to whence he came. But not you, Sanji, Zeph said, crossing his arms over his chest as Sanji grit his teeth. Didn't the old man always tell him to feed someone if they were hungry? He opened his mouth to sharply respond when he was interrupted by an unexpected voice. Sorry boss, I wasn't watching what I was doing and dropped some plates. I didn't want you to find out, so I tossed them overboard. You can ask Sanji, he caught me, but I begged him not to tell you since I didn't want them to be added to the debt. Naruto spoke up, although neither Sanji nor Zeph really believed him as he confessed his supposed crimes while balancing 15 plates across his body without a single one wobbling. Still, both men could see that he was going to take the punishment rather than let Zeph punish Sanji. Well, you were right, I would have added them to the debt owed, but since you tired to hide it rather than come clean, I'm going to double the charges. And you're constrained to washing dishes until your buttery fingers improve, understand? Zeph said, turning on his peg leg as he left the kitchen, Naruto keeping a straight face as he turned. Somehow managing to send all 15 dishes skittering across the bar and into the hands of the passing waitstaff. Well, guess I'm off to the sink, Naruto said as he brushed past Sanji, who watched the blonde go as he gave off the presence of nonchalance. Sanji didn't know why, but he reached out and grabbed the now deemed dishwasher's arm. Naruto turned back to look at him with a raised eyebrow. Thanks. Stay late tonight, and I'll show you some stuff. He offered as Naruto smiled, nodding as he pulled away to the large sink, turning the knob over fully as it filled up with hot water. Within minutes, the blonde had his hands submerged in soapy dish water, scrubbing away at the used dishes as he tried to keep up with the rapid demand of the cooks. Once again, it seemed he was the only one at his current job. That night was spent with Sanji demonstrating how to, and then supervising Naruto, how to best cook different kinds of meat, depending on how tough they were. By the time they finish, Naruto was caught creeping back onto the ship by Luffy's trained nose from the various smells of cooked meat. However, a quick Haki-infused fist put Luffy down for the night as Naruto fell into bed, embracing the hold of sleep. The morning came all too soon, chasing away the haze in Naruto's brain and the dreams of his friends and crewmates. He stumbled into the Baratie, rubbing his eyes as he washed his hands, pulling on an apron as he began running the dishwater into the sink to prepare as the various chefs picked served breakfast to the workers and other chefs, as well as the earlier customers, such as Luffy's crew. Devouring his own plate with impunity, he began his day's work as customers began to stream in and Naruto fell into the repetitive motions of his duty. The hours slipping by, he was broken out of his daydreams by a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he came face to face with Zeph. "Yeah, boss?" the blonde asked, drying his hands as Zeph led him away from the sink. "A package has arrived for you with your crew," Zeph said, pushing him towards the door. "And when you get back, we need another waiter, so you're being moved off dishwashing duty. Hopefully your short stint washed off all the butter from before," Zeph ordered as Naruto nodded in obedience, rushing out the door towards the table Luffy's crew usually occupied. Par for the course, Luffy had a plate of meat in front of him, seemingly inhaling the food. Next to him, Zoro sat drinking a mug of alcohol, and Usopp was regaling several bystanders with tales of his great adventures. Finally, Nami was absent. "Zeph mentioned a package arrived for me," Naruto asked as Zoro pointed towards a box sitting on the floor beside the table. Naruto thanked him, placing the box on the table as he opened it. Seeing the message to Chanel he sent came in. He reached it to pick them up, only to be interrupted as the front doors were thrown open. "Big bro Luffy, big bro Zoro, we got trouble," Yosaku shouted, capturing the attention of the table, as well as several other patrons of the restaurant. "Big sis Nami kicked us off and took the ship somewhere," he continued as the Strafuts jumped to their feet. "What?" they shouted, only for Yosaku to be sent flying inwards by a flying Johnny as they hit the ground in a crumpled heap. The open door was blocked out by a large figure, who stumbled inside to reveal a large man covered in by a ratty cloak, supported by none other than the man whom Sanji had fed earlier. "Please, help us," the cloaked man said feebly. Sanji and Zeph turned silently back to the kitchen. "Don Krieg," the man said. "Sanji, you fed me, can't you make some more food for the rest of our crew?" he yelled. Not getting any response, Krieg growled, owing off his cloak to reveal a large man covered in golden armor as he pointed several guns at the place. "My crew is starving, I need enough food to feed 50 people, right now," he ordered as Patty appeared, smiling and bowing before pulling out a cannon and firing it at the man, only for the smoke to clear and reveal him to be unscathed. Angrily, the armored man punched Patty, knocking him away as he pointed his guns at Patty, about to fire when a large bag of food landed in front of him. Looking up, he saw Zeph standing there. "There's enough food in there for 50 meals. Now go feed your crew," Zeph ordered. Krieg just stared at Zeph before smirking. "Red Leg Zeph, the famous pirate captain. Rumors have it that you kept a log of your path through the Grand Line. With that, we'd have no trouble getting through it. As soon as my crew is fed, you're going to be taking this place and that log." Krieg snarled as he turned to leave. "Come Jin, we have work to do." "That's fine, now that we've fed you, we can beat you," Zeph said simply, not even looking at Krieg as he walked away. As soon as Krieg and Jin were gone, the assembled cooks turned on Sanji. "Sanji, why would help them? Now they're going to attack the Baratie," Patty shouted as Sanji puffed on his cigarette. "I won't let anyone starve," he said simply, and Patty lifted up by the collar of his suit jacket. "What kind of twisted logic is that?" he asked, Zeph interjecting. "The kind of logic that you can't understand. None of you except Sanji can understand what it is to starve, to be at the mercy of the ocean." Zeph said, and Patty dropped Sanji, who straightened his jacket as everyone began walking outside, the Strafuts following along as they saw that the Going Merry was in fact gone, and Nami with it. In the distance, they could just make out the ship floating away. "Okay Luffy, what should we do?" Naruto asked before a loud cry cut through the air. "Captain, it's him. It's the same guy that took us down last time," was the only warning until Don Krieg's giant ship was split perfectly in two, revealing a small ship shaped like a coffin with a man standing on it, placing his massive black blade back on his back as he floated closer to the Baratie. "That's him, the world's strongest swordsman," Naruto heard Zoro say as two large platforms began rising from the water around the Baratie. "Hawkeye, Mihawk, one of the 9 royal Shibukai," Zeph said as if discussing the weather as Zoro gripped his swords tighter before calling out his challenge to the arriving swordsman. Naruto sighed, watching as Yu and Johnny laid Zoro in the small raft, careful not to agitate his grievous wounds. He could have told Zoro that fighting Mihawk would end in defeat, but he knew the look in Zoro's eyes, the look of determination. The look of one who refused to die until they accomplished their dream. It was the same look he held in his eyes, and he saw in Luffy's eyes. "Thick-skulled swordsman," Naruto snorted as he walked over to the small raft that was supposed to carry the twin swordsmen, Zoro, and Usopp after Nami. "So, you got the plan down." Seeing Usopp nod in response, Naruto smirked. "Then hold on tightly, and I'll give you a head start." Before they could question him, he scooped up the raft, spinning a few times before hurling the raft across the water as it skipped after the leaving Going Merry. "Okay Luffy, try not to take too long. We got to go after Nami and the others before it's too late," Naruto ordered, still assuming the big brother role. Luffy nodded, cracking his knuckles as the invading pirates began climbing onto the platform. Luffy stretched his arms over, grabbing onto some wreckage as he flew at Don Krieg. "He'll be fine," Zeph said from behind the blonde as he turned, raising his eyebrow. "I know. I'm worried the dense idiot will destroy something like our boat we need, or that ship and drown," Naruto explained, barely leaning back as a pirate went flying past him. Without even looking, he kneed straight up into the pirate's chest, making him vomit blood. "Oh, why did you do that?" Naruto pouted as he shook his boots off before growling as he saw most of the chefs beaten on the floor. A few were still fighting like Patty and Sanji, and Zeph could probably handle himself if necessary, but they were slowly being overwhelmed. Pulling his coat open, Naruto pulled out a pair of matching butcher knives. Flipping them around into a reverse grip, he crouched down. Pulling the tip of his top hat down, he sped off, reappearing on the other side of the platform. With a vicious animalistic smile on his face, his knives dripping with fresh blood. "Fresh carved meat anybody?" he asked, as several pirates fell to the ground, blood spewing from multiple wounds. "A chef only takes the prime cuts," Naruto said, flicking his knives as he washed them in the seawater. "I'd hardly call you a chef," Sanji said from behind him. Naruto snorted, flipping the smoking blonde off. Rising, he wiped the wet knives off on his pants. "I'd duck, now," he said, both blondes hitting the deck as Patty was sent flying over their heads, splashing into the ocean as they looked to see a man covered in strange armor. "All this blood and none of it is mine," the man said. "All the fights the Krieg pirates have been in and I've never bled once." He continued confidently. "Yeah, you'll never beat Pearl's armor. Even Mihawk's attack that split the ship didn't scratch him. Nothing can make him bleed," a random Krieg pirate declared before being taken down by soaring Luffy, who hit Pearl in the face, breaking his nose. "Grr, get back here Krieg," Luffy shouted, using his powers to rocket himself back at the golden-armored Krieg, punching him across the face, knocking him down in a heap. "Blood, blood, my blood," Pearl yelled, looking at the red liquid with pure rage. "Pearl, it's okay. It's just a nosebleed, not even a wound. See, it's already Santo." The Krieg pirates were cut off by Pearl's shield, which he used to backhand the pirate, caving in his face. Then, he began crashing the shield plates together like cymbals as they caught on fire. Lost in the rage, he tossed fireballs around, catching the wooden platform on fire. "You fool. If my new ship gets burnt because of you, that nosebleed won't be the worst thing," Don Krieg shouted before Luffy hit him, ignoring his spiky cloak. Sanji started towards the raging Pearl, who was still throwing fireballs around, despite Don Krieg's threats. However, he was brought up short by the cry of, "Stop right there, the old guy gets it." Jin ordered as he held Zeph down with a pistol to his head. Sanji started towards him, only for him to cock the hammer back on his pistol. "I don't want to do this, but I'll kill him, Sanji. You know this could happen when you fed me, and the rest of our crew," Jin said, and Sanji gritted his teeth, biting through his cigarette. "Yeah, Commander Jin always comes through. They'll never beat him and Pearl. Our two strongest members," the collected Krieg pirates still conscious shouted. "I'll give you an opening, and you take him out. I'll handle his overdramatic friend." Naruto said from behind Sanji as he gave a sharp nod as Naruto smirked. Reaching into the package that arrived earlier, which he was hiding under his top hat, he pulled out a pair of black leather gloves. "Looks like I'll get a chance to test these sooner than I expected. Just hope they work like expected," he said, flipping the box in the air before tossing its sidearm at Jin, who reacted like most people and shot the box as Sanji ran at him. Surrounded by fire, Pearl was watching as Sanji kicked Jin away, and Luffy kept beating Krieg's equipment. Crashing his plates together, he started to throw fireballs at Sanji, only for Naruto to walk through the growing flames, swatting the fireballs away. "How can you just walk through the flames like it's nothing?" Pearl said in fear as Naruto clenched his fists, the hidden blades curling up to reveal 5 curved blades. "You should know better than to try and burn a fox," Naruto said, vanishing for a second before dropping in front of Pearl, who held up his shields to block the attack. "Ha! As if those puny blades could scratch my mighty armor, now die," Pearl shouted, swinging his plates like cymbals to smash Naruto's head between the plates, only for the blonde to smirk. "Fox claws, success," Naruto said lazily as Pearl's coveted armor fell to the ground in thick strips, leaving the man open as Naruto grabbed his fists, using them as he kicked Pearl in the stomach, knocking him into the ocean as he floated up with swirls in his eyes. "I think that's my part done," he said as he walked back to the restraint, leaning against the wall as he yawned widely. Meanwhile with Sanji, he was fighting against Jin, who had discarded his pistol for a pair of twin tonfa which he twirled around, trying to hit Sanji, who jumped back to dodge. Aiming for his neck, Sanji kicked at the commander of the Krieg pirates, only for him to cross his tonfa and block the kick, although he was still knocked back. Growling, Jin leapt at the blonde cook, ONLY for his attack to be blocked as Sanji jumped, kicking him as his neck snapped back, and sending him to the ground. "Jin, Pearl, you're both pathetic," Krieg shouted, as everyone turned to look at the armored captain. "If a nothing cook can beat the commander of the Krieg pirates, maybe you aren't worthy of the title. Hear that, boys? Whoever brings me that blonde cook's head are my new number 2s. Krieg shouted, only for Jin to push himself upwards, smashing a few pirates that got too close. "As if I would let them take my position. I'm the strongest for a reason, I'm Jin the Black-Hearted. As if I would lose where anyone else in this crew could succeed." Jin growled out as Sanji kicked away several pirates still standing by, spinning while standing on his hands. Jin tried to take advantage of Sanji's opening by smashing one of his tonfa into the blonde's chest, making him spew blood. However, Sanji pushed through the pain, nailing Jin in his exposed gut, sending him to the ground. "You pathetic traitor. Maybe this will give you some incentive," Krieg shouted, turning and firing a canister that began spewing green gas everywhere. However, this left him open to a hard punch by Luffy that shattered his armor. Snarling, he pressed the 2 shoulder plates together as a long stick and blade sprouted from them. Don Krieg's using the MH5 and his ultimate battle spear. "The remaining Krieg pirates said as they began scrambling on their persons for gas masks to stop the poison gas. Krieg noticed Jin going for his and ordered him to throw it away. "Is this the kind of man you follow, boy? He wants you to kill the people that saved your life, and die simply because he says so," Naruto asked from his place on the wall as he held a gas mask to his face. Beside him 2 Krieg pirates were profusely bleeding. Looking down at the gas mask and the gas rising around him, he shook his head, starting to put the mask until he saw that the remaining Krieg pirates had fled underwater. Sanji began coughing, as Jin's face hardened, and he stood tossing the mask at Sanji, who caught it in surprise. "Now we're even, I've saved your life. Now come finish this fight." Jin said, once more, re-spinning his tonfa despite coughing and the bloody drool leaking from his mouth. Sanji sighed, aiming one final kick at Jin, who didn't even try and lift his weapons to block as he was sent flying by the kick as he landed in heap. Looking at Sanji's neutral expression as his vision darkened. I'm sorry Krieg, I just couldn't kill them after what they did for me. Jin thought as he fell into unconsciousness. Smiling slightly, Naruto looked over in time to see his brother smash his head against Krieg's spear, which exploded as Luffy yelled, ignoring the pain as he grabbed the vulnerable Krieg, stretching his arms as he shot into the air, pulling Krieg after him as he flipped in mid-air. Gum gum hammer, he yelled as he used his powers to send Krieg rocketing down as he crashed into the sea as water showered everyone. All the still conscious Krieg pirates looked in shock as their captain was utterly defeated, Luffy landing easily on a floating piece of flotsam, breathing heavily although he wasn't that injured. Good job, Luffy, Naruto said as he blinked the water out of his eyes. Luffy cheered, sitting down on the small wooden driftwood, before bubbles started rising beside him. Nah. Naruto opened his mouth to warn his younger brother only for Krieg to surface, his face beaten bloody, with rage in his eyes. As if I the great and mighty Don Krieg would lose to some no-name pirate. He shouted as he threw his weighted net over Luffy, dragging him down into the ocean. Luffy, Naruto shouted, shooting to his feet as he jogged to the edge of the platform, looking into the water. As he saw his brother sinking as Krieg swam up, he heard a splash to the side of him and saw Sanji's discarded suit jacket as he swam down to rescue Luffy. Sighing in relief, Naruto sat back, hearing a low gurgling next to him. He ignored it as Krieg resurfaced, pulling himself onto the broken mast of his former flagship. He almost just killed your brother, and yet you're just sitting there like it's nothing. The gurgling voice said from next to Naruto. Looking down with a masked smirk, he poked Jin in the head. You're one to talk, I saw you not even try and stop Sanji from finishing you off, why was that again? Besides, if I got revenge on everyone that tried to kill my brother, I'd never have time for my own adventures. He wanted to be a pirate, the constant struggle for survival is part of the territory. Naruto explained as Jin chuckled, before coughing up more blood as his body was slowly killed by the poison. Reaching up, Naruto removed his gas mask, pushing it to Jin's face as he breathed easier. Even if it was racked with the occasional cough. Tell me, why do you follow Krieg when he would so easily sacrifice you? Naruto questioned as Jin coughed, moving the gas mask so he didn't drown in his own blood. Once it stopped, he put the mask back as he took a deep breath of clean air. He was the strongest, he answered simply, looking contemplatively at the man current L. Why yelling at the remaining Krieg pirates for losing to such weak pirates? And now, Naruto continued the line of questioning as Jin chuckled softly, only for his breath to be racked by a gurgling cough. He's cough my captain, Jin answered as Naruto nodded, the pair watching as Sanji finally resurfaced with Luffy, who was blue as the blonde chef pulled him onto the platform, pressing on his chest. And what if a different captain were to offer you a place on his crew? The blonde asked as Jin looked at his shock, before it was replaced with a contemplative look. Looking into the blue sky, he thought of when he first met Krieg, and how he promised to follow him to the end of the seas. Well, what have we here? Boys, it looks like we get to be the ones to bring in the pirate captain Don Krieg. A thickly accented voice said as everyone turned to see the marine ship bearing down on Don Krieg's remaining crew, which had managed to procure several lifeboats from the wreckage of their ship. Cannon fire rang out as the marine ship began firing on the retreating fleet of lifeboats, the surviving Krieg pirates rowing furiously to escape. They rowed up next to the platform, CKLY, gathering as many of the Krieg pirates on the small lifeboats as possible. It took 3 men to lift the unconscious Pearl into the boat. Jin picked himself up and tried to climb aboard, apologizing to Naruto and Sanji. As well the other Bharati chefs, only to be kicked back by a nondescript Krieg pirate. As if we'd allow you on this ship after you failed Don Krieg. He shouted, the others agreeing as Jin picked himself up, only to be knocked back down as the pirate punched him in his broken ribs, making him cough up more blood as they pushed off, Jin trying and failing to leap after them and get aboard. Wait, don't leave me here, he yelled, only to be ignored as the sound of cannon fire drowned him out as he fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Feeling a hand on his shoulder, he looked up at the impassive face of Naruto, who held out a hand to help him up. "There's a place on my crew if you'd like it," he said as Jin stared at the hand, then after the fleeing Krieg pirates. "I swear I'll get stronger. Stronger than even you, Don Krieg, and when that day comes I will prove that I don't need you. I will show every one of you that it isn't the captain that makes a strong crew." Jin shouted after them as he grasped Naruto's hand, pulling himself up. "Welcome aboard," Naruto said lazily, turning away as she headed back inside to find some more coffee. Naruto yawned as he reclined on the small boat, taking a nap in the warm midday sun as the boat floated along after Nami on the Going Merry and Johnny, Yosaku, Usopp, and Zoro after her. Even with his eyes shut, he could feel the tension on the boat between Jin and Sanji, although Luffy was oblivious as he sat at the front, wooing and awing at every little thing. He remembered Sanji's story about wanting to find the All Blue and smirked. A man who wants to be king of the pirates, a swordsman who wants to be the world's best swordsman, a man who wants to explore the oceans and have great adventures, a cook who wants to find the All Blue. And what was Nami's dream again? Naruto thought, shrugging it off. He'd just ask her when they got to wherever they were going. He was awoken from his nap by Luffy's outcry. Barely opening his eyes, he saw what would cause this response in his younger brother as he saw a destroyed village. Some houses were upside down, others had perfect circle cut out of them, and some even were only piles of rubble. "This is where Nami was headed?" Luffy asked hesitantly as Naruto just shook his head in disbelief. "I'm not sure it is, Luffy. Look over at that sign," Naruto pointed out. As the quartet looked at the sign that read, "we_C_O_N_N_HL_V_GE", was all they could make out due to the sign being shattered into multiple pieces. Even so, it was enough for Naruto to make an assumption. The letter mentioned a place called Kokoyashi Village. "That doesn't fit with the sign," Naruto said as they pushed off, heading down the coast. "All the same, what kind of monster could just upend a building?" Sanji asked the question on most of their minds. Naruto decided against mentioning that both he and Hidera could do it, although Hidera had a habit of breaking the building when he did it. Naruto just couldn't be bothered picking up someone's home for no purpose. "Do you guys think that has something to do with why Nami told us not to follow her?" Jin asked, Sanji glaring at the former Krieg pirate. "Nami-chan told Luffy, me, and Naruto to stay away, you were never included," he ranted as Naruto gave off a low growl as he tipped his hat low over his eyes. "Keep quiet until we get to Kokoyashi Village. Sanji. Jin is now a member of my crew, he even apologized to you and the others back at the Baratie, so deal with it unless you want to take it up with me." Naruto order. D as Sanji huffed, going back to helping Luffy look for the village as Naruto leaned back, closing his eyes. Without thinking about it, he reached into his pocket, pulling out the piece of paper that I'd found after the fight in the same pocket, his eyes wandering over the letter. "Dear Strafuts, I'm leaving you. I have something I have to do. I wish we could keep adventuring together, but I'm mad. Promise to some people that I have to keep. Please don't follow me, both for my sake and yours. If you want to keep your brother safe, then stay away from Kokoyashi Village, please. Sincerely, Nami." Flipping it over, he saw it was a map with a course already charted from the Baratie to an island further south. A big X was even on the island along with several wet spots that may have been sea spray, or something. Naruto tightly clenched his fist, thinking of the red-headed navigator as he heard Sanji and Luffy talking as the boat ran into the sandy beach. "Hello, anybody here?" Luffy shouted. Running into the village in front of them, this one untouched as Luffy ran around shouting as people began to stream out of the houses. "Who are they? They look like pirates." "Pirates, we can't afford any more pirates around here," the crowd said to each other as they began to surround the quartet, who were back to back in the middle of the mob as the villagers began pulling out pitchforks and wooden sticks. "Someone go and ask Genzo for a couple of his swords," someone said as a brunette ran off towards a house towards the outer edge. No need for swords, we come in peace." Jin's aid for the quartet as the mob began shouting their displeasure. A few threw punches that hit Luffy only for the Strafut captain to ignore them. "What do you pirates want? We haven't got any money or treasure for you to plunder." Someone asked unseen, another voice whispering, hide the women and children. We're here looking for our friend Nami. Luffy said, and the crowd was stunned into silence. Go to the north and look for a village. An elderly man said, Naruto interjecting now, we already did, the place was wrecked. Are you saying that Nami did that? The blonde asked skeptically. Not directly. But the members of Arlong's fishmen destroyed the village when they couldn't pay him off anymore. You should just give up on your friend and get as far away from this island as possible. A younger voice said only for the brunette from before to come running back wide-eyed. He's here, Arlong's at Genzo's house, he's trying to pressure him for more money. She hissed as the crowd gasped and split up. Some hiding in their houses, while others went to see what was going on. Luffy and company were part of this group as they jumped onto the rooftops, watching the confrontation. A blue-skinned man with a jagged nose was holding an elderly gentleman up by his shirt collar. He has a pinwheel, Luffy whispered, only for Sanji to cover his mouth to muffle the pirate. I heard rumors that someone was hoarding weapons in this village. Then, I come here and what do I find? The blue-skinned man asked rhetorically, as he gestured towards the small pile of swords and knives. No, I just collect antique weapons. I'm an elderly man, I don't even know how to use a sword, Arlong. The elderly man said as Arlong grinned viciously. Let Genzo go, Arlong. The growing crowd shouted as Arlong frowned. Using his one free hand to grasp the corner of a building, lifting it into the air before flipping it over as he put back down. You don't tell me what to do, you peons. I'll let go just as soon as he pays for all these weapons he owns. I think 30 million berries should suffice, as well as all these antique weapons. Arlong said, only to suddenly drop Genzo as a small black ball hit his hand. That's right, the G-Great Usopp is protecting this versus village. Usopp said from an adjacent rooftop, quivering like a leaf. Oh well then I'll leave them alone. Deal with the pathetic waste, chew. Arlong ordered as another fishman came forwards with thick lips as he spit at Usopp who dived for cover as he tried to run away, only to be clotheslined by a third fishman. Good job, Karubi. Now bring him back to Arlong Park. Arlong said as they started to walk away. We'll be back same time tomorrow for the money, and if it ain't here, I'll be very unhappy. Arlong threatened as the fishmen walked away. Usopp tossed over Karubi's shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Luffy started after Arlong, only to be stopped by Naruto who shook his head. Usopp can wait. He's a Strafoot pirate, which means he won't be taken out that easily. Right now, we to get that guy to a doctor and find out what the deal is with this Arlong guy and Nami, K. The blonde said as Luffy looked after his crewmate. Sighing before shaking his head in assent. That settled, the quartet hopped on, Jin and Sanji getting under his arms as they helped him up. Follow me, a blue-haired female said. Seeing the men as she started to walk off. Jin grunted as Sanji let go of Genzo, chasing after the woman while wiggling with hearts in his eyes. Despite this, Jin didn't comment as he followed after them. Following her into what Naruto assumed was her house, Jin set Genzo down in an empty chair as the woman began attending to him. So, tell me, what it is that you really want from my little sister? The woman asked, not looking at the quartet. Not receiving any answers, she amended, I'm Nojiko, Nami's older sister. Now tell me, why are you here, and don't lie to me. Nojiko ordered, ignoring Sanji's love-struck words. We're her friends. Both Naruto and Luffy said simultaneously with serious expressions as Nojiko blinked in surprise. Not very good friends if she ran off without you. She probably just told you that so you'd let her near your treasure. Nojiko said, sitting back in a chair as Genzo snored softly. Well, we have no treasure to begin with so it wasn't her best choice. Now how about you tell us why she's a member of Arlong's crew? Naruto responded as Nojiko stared at the ground before beginning with her story of how their mother Bellamere found Nami and raised her alongside Nojiko. Until Arlong came along and began taxing the village. How she was executed because she didn't have enough berries for both her and her daughters. And finally, how Arlong took Nami when he saw her maps. How he wanted her to draw maps for him, and he'd let Nojiko live tax-free if she did. So, Nami's being forced to help Arlong to keep you safe, even though he killed your mother. That doesn't add up. Why would she leave to steal treasure from pirates if she's supposed to be helping him? Naruto said as he pushed himself up, heading for the door. Where are you going? Nojiko asked as she started after him. To find Nami and get some answers. Something is missing from your explanation, and I have a feeling only Nami will be able to answer my questions. He said, opening the door only for Nojiko to grab his shoulder. And what makes you think she'll just tell you? The brunette asked curiously as Naruto looked down, pulling the brim of his hat low over his eyes as a tear ran down his cheek. Because I never knew my father, all I had was my mother, and when I lost her, all I wanted was revenge. I need to know how she can just help the man who did that. He snarled as he pulled free, bending down as he raced away in the direction of Arlong Park. Nojiko was left reaching after him. Naruto. Naruto, wake up. It's mommy. Naruto heard the words whispered in his ear. But all he could see was red as he remembered her lifeless body as her blood painted the ground. He snapped, pulling his sword free from its place at his side, whipping it in a circle with a loud rag. As a wave of light was left behind as he switched the grip as he slammed it into the ground point first, the light shooting off in fragments. Breathing deeply, he resheathed the blade before resuming sprinting towards Arlong Park. And hopefully Nami. He never noticed the pair of watchful eyes that had seen him lose his cool. Coming to stop without a single breath lost, Naruto leaned against the wall listening to the voices inside the walled-off Arlong Park. Are you really going to let her go after she pays the 100 million beris, boss? Naruto didn't know that voice, it didn't sound as bloodthirsty as the ones from earlier. Of course not Hachi, the girl's ability with a pen is unrivaled. We'll just keep milking her for more money, since she'll never be able to pay 100 million beris. She can't stay away from here for too long or else I may lose my temper. And every time she comes back, we'll just take whatever she has and act none the wiser. Arlong said, the fishmen laughing inside as Naruto blood began to boil. Still I can't believe she just stabbed that guy with the long nose earlier. No hesitation, Hachi said in disbelief as Naruto gritted his teeth, refusing to believe that Nami would kill Usopp. And I still can't believe you just carried Zoro out of here. The one from earlier, Kurubi said rudely as Hachi apologized, probably not of the first time. Hey boss, how are we going to just take all Nami's money? Surely she'd notice one of us taking it, plus we don't even know where she hides it. Hachi asked as Arlong grunted annoyed with this line of questioning. You idiot, did you forget we have the local marines in our pocket, all we have to do is just give them a little money and they help us. I've already sent them to collect what is due ours. Arlong. G said as Naruto growled lowly before seeing some bubbles coming from the shore. Looking closer, Naruto saw a reed sticking out of the water as Usopp was below the surface, trying to avoid being noticed. Looking around, Naruto sank his arm into the water, grasping the sniper's overalls as he hauled him out of the water. Before he could say anything, the blonde covered his mouth with his hand. Shish, we got trouble. Nami is working both sides, and she's going to get burned if we don't go help her out. Think you can hold on? Naruto whispered to the curly-haired sniper, who nodded furiously as Naruto turned around. Allowing the man on as Naruto smirked, bending down as he began to run down the dirt road bent low like a sprinter as his feet blurred and Usopp was forced to pull his goggles down. And to keep the wind from drying his eyes out. Naruto came to stop with barely a sound, looking around at the silent village. Dropping Usopp on the ground, he walked down the main dirt road as he looked for any signs of life. Not finding any, he ran towards the last place he saw Luffy and his crew. Tensing his legs, he leapt onto a rooftop, jumping between buildings as he rushed over the top of the village. Finding the quaint house with little trouble. Hearing voices, he crouched down, peeking over the lip of the roof. A few seconds earlier, a ratty man in a marine coat walked up to Nami, who was arguing with her older sister. Nojiko. She was angry as she'd came back to the village to find Luffy sitting there after she'd told him to stay away from the island. After yelling at him, and shoving him out the door, she'd confronted Nojiko about what she had told the Strafuts. Hello, are you Nami the pirate thief? The mousy marine asked as Nami glared at him for interrupting her conversation. Maybe, who are you? Nami answered with no respect. I'm Nezumi, the Marine captain stationed near here, and we've received reports that you've been stealing people's money. Nezumi said with authority. Naturally, this is illegal and we need to seize these stolen possessions. He continued as Marines brushed past the girls, barging into their shared house. What? No, you can't do that. Nami said, trying to follow only to be blocked by a Marine guarding the door. Of course we can, we're Marines, and we uphold the law. Nezumi said with his hands behind his back. Are you resisting because that would not be recommended? He said, Nami gritting her teeth as she stayed quiet. A few moments later, a Marine came out. Sir, we couldn't find anything inside, should we search the property? He asked, Nezumi smirking as he nodded sharply. Yes, search the entire area, dig up the tangerine grove if nothing turns up. She's hidden those 100 million berries somewhere around here. Nezumi ordered as the Marines saluted. Marching into the tangerine grove, shovels in hand. Wait, how did you know it was 100 million berries? Arlong sent you, didn't he? Nami accused as Nezumi smirked, answering. The question is Naruto decided to intercede. That seems a bit harsh. Naruto said, landing on the ground as he smiled disarmingly at Nezumi. Who are you? I think you're one of her associates, and Herefore we'll need to confiscate your possessions as well. Nezumi said as Naruto shrugged. You're welcome to try, but I can't promise it'll be pleasant for you. Naruto said lazily as he cleaned out his ear with his pinky. What? You're going to fight all of us, Blondie? We have you outnumbered 20-1, even if Nami tries to resist. Besides, we have protection on this island. A raven-haired Marine taunted as Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Who said I was alone? He said as Luffy landed next to him, Sanji appearing beside him with Zoro and Usopp right behind them. Lastly, Jin came up as N. Izumi began sweating before he pulled out his flintlock and fired. That sparked the fighting as the Strafuts ran into the tangerine grove to forcibly remove the Marines. Naruto lagged back, watching the one-sided fight before a Marine yelled, I found it, over here sir. Nezumi slinked away while Naruto was distracted with a charging Marine, who he tripped up and slammed face first into the ground. Seeing the fleeing Marine captain, he gave chase only to dive to the side as Nezumi fired his flintlock, snarling as he pulled something out of his pocket, throwing it down as Naruto chased him. Within seconds, the tangerine grove was going up in flames as Naruto growled, charging at Nezumi as a wall of flame rose in his way, the ratty captain smirking until Naruto dove through the flames, not slowing down as he tackled the Marine, who hit his face on the lockbox where Nami stored her money. How can not hesitate when facing those flames? Nezumi said through his broken nose as Naruto hauled him up. One good punch putting him down as he pulled Nezumi coat off before using it to try and put the flames out. The flames of your injustice are mere sparks compared to the flames of my anger. Naruto snarled as he began digging up dirt to put the fire out as Nezumi jumped to his feet, running away quickly with the lockbox in hand. Naruto swore loudly, but was unable to chase him down without leaving the fires to grow untamed. Finally, the village seemed to notice the smoke rising from the grove as the volunteer fire department started a bucket brigade, dousing the flames as Naruto shook off the ash coating he'd acquired. Walking back to the group, he saw the missing someone. He got away, sorry. He apologized to Nojiko before looking around, seeing the insides of the house were in ruins from the unwarranted search by the Marines. Where's Nami? He asked curiously as Nojiko looked down, and Naruto got his answer as he took off towards Arlong Park, his legs moving too fast to be seen as he felt his anger boiling up inside. With Nami, the orange-haired navigator was furious as she stormed into Arlong Park, shoving past the fishmen who didn't even bother to hide their smirk. As she glared at the saw-nosed fishman. He looked at her disdainfully, although Nami could detect the hint of a smirk under his uncaring expression. What happened to never breaking a deal when money's involved? Nami yelled at the fishman who did smirk this time. I don't know why you're angry, Nami, but I promise I had nothing to do with it. I didn't break any promises. He said mockingly, crossing his heart. You really think I'm too stupid to know that you sent those Marines to steal my money? Especially when they claimed to have your protection. Nami snarled as Arlong stood, shaking his head despairingly. Nami, I would think after all this time you would learn not to believe everything a Marine tells you. But if you lost the money then I'm afraid you'll just have to start over. Arlong said disapprovingly as Nami clenched her fists tight enough for the knuckles to turn white. Like hell I am. I'm not going to give you any more money. Nami yelled, turning on her heel as she started to walk away. She was stopped when the shark fishman grabbed her arm, pulling her back. You know the deal, Nami, Arlong started as Nami gulped, biting her lip as she drew blood, trying to pull away weakly. I get my 100 million berries, and Kokoyashi village is yours. But if you're not going to even try and get me the money, then I can't promise that village will be there when you come back next time. Arlong said as Nami pushed her tears back. She wanted desperately to pull away and be free of his presence, but she couldn't condemn her village to destruction just because of a little trouble. I'd appreciate it if you let go of my friend. A powerful voice said as the fishmen, and Nami turned to look at the strolling blonde. Naruto. Nami mumbled under her breath. Who are you, human? Explain yourself and then get out, your kind aren't welcome in Arlong Park. A fishman ordered as Naruto scoffed. You could call me an anonymous benefactor. Naruto said with masked pleasure as he threw something at Arlong, the fishman reaching up to catch it, releasing Nami as Naruto scooped her up, holding her protectively. What is this? Arlong asked confused as Naruto turned to leave. He could feel the tears falling from Nami's eyes as they ran down her cheeks and his chest. A check for 150 million berries, now Nami's paid her debt, so get lost. Naruto snarled with a Lu. K of restrained rage as Nami looked up at him in shock as the fishmen watched him leave. But I thought she just owed 100 million. A random fishman asked as Naruto looked at him murderously as he tensed his leg. With barely any effort, he kicked the gate to Arlong Park once, sending the massive iron gates skittering across the ground, a dent in the center as Naruto stormed away. Then you have enough to buy yourselves a new gate, he said venomously as the fishman watched him leave. Looking back to their leader, Arlong had a look of rage on his face as he clenched his fists, crumpling the check as he ordered them. Follow them, and destroy that village. Arlong snarled as the fishmen gulped nervously, nodding in obedience as they marched after the blonde and redhead. Once they were away, Nami began squirming as Naruto stopped. Looking down at her as she beat his chest, tears streaming down her cheeks, her eyes shut tightly even though it did nothing to stop the flow of tears. You stupid man, I could have handled it. She hissed, Naruto smiling faintly as he held her as she didn't stop beating him. Why would you help me, when I already told you and your brother to leave me alone? She whispered as Naruto bent down, kissing her forehead. Because no matter how much you may beat us, and yell at us, we're friends. I could hear your heart crying out for help, and I couldn't ignore that. Naruto explained as Nami looked at him with wide eyes as she got free, staring at him with bloodshot eyes as she tried to back away from him. But you just gave them all that money like it was nothing. How do you even have that much money? Nami asked in disbelief as Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. I have my ways, Nami-chan, he said before his expression got serious. Nami noticing the stark change in his demeanor, and I would have done the same if it was 300 million berries, because there is no price too steep for me to pay for your happiness. Naruto said as Nami stared wide-eyed. She got closer to him as they both seemed to draw closer until a loud cry interrupted them, Nami jumping back as Naruto turned to glare at the intruders. Around 20 fishmen faced him as he pushed Nami behind him. Get back home, Nami-chan, I'll handle this. Naruto said as Nami looked at him like she wanted to argue. Naruto saw this and smiled. Go on, I'll be fine, I promise. ND if there's one thing you need to know about me, I never break my promises. Naruto said as Nami nodded hesitantly before running away as Naruto watched her before a burst of water hit him in the cheek as he glared at the lead fishman. The one from the previous day with the big lips, Chu, the blonde recalled. Do you really think you can beat all of us by yourself, Chu? Chu asked as Naruto didn't answer, simply drawing his sword. Do you think that drawing your sword will scare us superior fishmen? One of the fishmen asked confidently as Naruto smiled, showing his canines which extended longer than normal. A blade is not a tool of intimidation. To draw your blade is to declare intent to bleed, and quench your blade's thirst, and to do anything less is a dishonor to the swordsman name. Naruto said as he suddenly sprinted at them, eviscerating several fishmen before they could react as his blade was coated crimson as he looked at the growing pool of blood. Without even looking up, he blocked Chu's water gun attack with the flat of his blade as he swatted it away, hitting one of the other fishmen as he went down, gingerly holding his now bleeding shoulder as Naruto snickered. Charging at a small group of fishmen, he leapt in the air, coming down in a crouch as he split one down the middle, managing to kick two more away into their comrades as he pulled his sword out, Santa. BBing the downed fishmen before leaning to the side as Chu shot at him, the blonde falling back into a crouch with a twirl, relieving 5 more fishmen of their internal organs as he slashed upwards. Dividing Chu's attack down the middle as it split to either side of him, finishing off the last 2 fishmen. However, his good mood was ruined as Chu hit him with his water gun attack as Naruto turned robotically to stare at Chu. Who grinned? Did you just spit on me? Naruto asked rhetorically as Chu started to taunt only to find Naruto in front of him with a second sword in his hand as he held Who's head inside the curves of the blades as he growled at the helpless fishman. Demonic decapitation, he said simply as he pulled his blades in opposite directions, sending Chu's separated head into the air as Naruto flipped. Replacing his sword in its sheath on his side, and punting Chu's head back towards Arlong Park, all in one fluid motion as he began walking towards Kokoyashi village, whistling happily. Completely ignoring the pile of heavily bleeding fishmen in the middle of the road. Nami was on her knees in the middle of Kokoyashi village, a knife clutched tightly in her hands, her shoulder bleeding from the multiple stab wounds as she sniffled, her tears dripping steadily to the ground. Luffy's treasured straw hat was perched on her head. Her idiotic captain's words ran through her head over and over before she forced herself to her feet, turning to chase after them only to run straight into a muscled chest as she looked up at Naruto's soft smile. Looking down, she loosened her grip on the knife as Naruto looked at her caringly. Luffy and the others went to fight Arlong, she said simply as Naruto chuckled, looking behind himself. My brother can handle himself. I wish I could protect him forever, but eventually he'll have to learn how to walk on his own. Right now, you need me, he whispered as he bent down as the orange-haired girl fell to her knees. Get one thing straight, Blondie. I don't need you. I still don't understand how Luffy can be so simple yet so complicated about this friendship thing. Nami said as Naruto sat down beside her. I don't want to be a pirate. Especially after pirates killed. She trailed off as Naruto wrapped an arm around her shoulder, squeezing her in a side hug. But can you really say that Luffy is a pirate? Naruto asked as Nami looked at him confusedly. The world is hardly ever as black and white as some would paint it. Would you prefer Marines such as Nezumi to pirates such as myself or Luffy? Naruto asked as Nami looked down thinking about the answer. While she did that, Naruto shrugged his coat around. This is a vice admiral's coat. They traditionally have the kanji for justice stitched on the back, but Min-e has the kanji for freedom on the back. That's because a Marine believes in justice over everything, including other people's lives. There are Marines, very high up the chain of command, that would sink a cruise ship and sacrifice hundreds, even thousands of lives because there's a chance a petty thief, he paused to poke Nami's side as she looked at him with shock evident in her eyes, was on board. He finished as Nami shook, imagining herself dooming that many people to death unintentionally. Just the same that some pirates would sooner die than let one innocent person become a casualty of their actions. That is why I fight for freedom over justice, whether that puts me at odds with pirates or Marines. I will always defend those that don't have the power to do it themselves. Naruto said as he stood, extending a hand to Nami who looked at him with trepidation. The only question is, do you have the power to save yourself from your enslavement? His blue eyes seemed to glow with pure authority, and in that moment, Nami felt her heart beat loudly in her chest. She took his hand. Nami raced towards Arlong Park, not questioning that Naruto kept pace with her easily without seeming to try. Her knife was held tightly as she bent down, sprinting faster as Naruto smirked before copying her as his legs seemed to blur for a moment as he increased his speed, his orange cloak fluttering behind him. At his side, his blade tapped the beat against his leg. A teasing smile came over his face as he got behind Nami before scooping her up in a bridal carry, the orange-haired thief blushy. As Naruto seemed to blur as the landscape flew past the pair. It took 5 minutes to traverse the distance from Kokoyashi village to Arlong Park. Naruto did it in one as he skidded to a stop talk. Ing a deep breath as Nami ran towards the crowd of people who were watching the Arlong pirates be beaten in record time by the friendly Strafuts. Nami, what are you doing here? Just give me a moment to beat this annoyance and we can discuss whatever you need. Arlong said depreciatingly as he ducked under his wild swing by Luffy, who twisted in mid-air to slam his fist into the back of Arlong's head. I've come to kill you, Arlong, Nami said seriously as she brandished her knife in front of her. Arlong looked at her in shock until he laughed loudly, swatting the knife away with ease as he grabbed Luffy's leg, throwing him through the wall of Arlong Park without looking as he reached for Nami. He barely touched her skin when he was sent rocketing back by a sudden introduction to his belly. I believe we've already discussed touching my friend, Naruto said with calm disapproval as he pulled his fist back, watching Arlong skip on the water before crashing into the stone wall surrounding the small bay-like area. Haha, as if a weak punch like that would beat a fishman like myself. And what tiny amount of hope you had left is gone. Now that I'm in the water, I'm unparalleled, Arlong taunted as he sunk beneath surface, watching as Luffy stumbled out of the rubble, shaking his head to rid himself of dust. Shark darts, he shouted, bursting from the water at high speed, aiming to pierce Luffy with his namesake saw-like nose. However, Luffy dodged, the blue-skinned fishman leaping back into the water as he made another pass at the Strafut captain, who once again dodged as Arlong began to lose his cool. Just die already, you stupid human, so I can beat that impudent human that thinks he can hit me with no consequences. Arlong shouted as Luffy stood his ground, interweaving his fingers to form a net as he caught the leaping fishman, throwing him to the ground before punching him as his teeth splintered, Luffy smirking triumphantly. Do you think you've accomplished something? Arlong questioned as a new set of teeth came in within seconds only for him to pull them out. I'm a shark. If I lose a set of teeth, a new set will come even stronger than before. Arlong pull. Ed another set out to prove his point as he snapped them with his hands, thrusting one forwards, trying to catch Luffy, who dove to the side as Arlong's teeth sunk into a stone pillar, which seconds later shattered from the force as he held the untouched teeth. Whoa, you better watch out, Luffy, Naruto said from the sidelines as the straw hat-wearing pirate nodded silently, before diving to the side once more to dodge the shark fishman's bite. However, he easily retaliated by whipping his foot into Arlong's cheek, causing him to flinch as Luffy grabbed his mouth, pulling out a set of teeth which he put into his rubbery mouth. Now I have shark teeth too, Luffy shouted as Naruto deadpanned at his brother, and Nami didn't know whether to growl and threaten the boy or laugh at his comical appearance. Arlong growled at the offense as he leapt at the black-haired teen, using one of his sets of teeth to bite into Luffy's chest as Luffy shouted in pain, while using the teeth in his mouth to try and rip Luffy's throat out. But the rubber captain managed to fight through the pain as he sunk his impromptu teeth into Arlong's shoulder, leaving them there as he stepped back to avoid having his throat ripped open by the sharp teeth of the blue-skinned fishman. As if that would hurt me, you don't have the jaw strength to even break the skin, Arlong shouted as he removed the teeth, semen Gly ignoring the blood leaking from the wounds. After all, fishmen are 10x stronger than Gum spear. Luffy interrupted by clapping his sandals together and using them like a spear as he nailed Arlong in the face, sending him hurtling back towards the open gate as Arlong snarled at Luffy, climbing to his feet before noticing where he was. Smiling like a shark that smelled blood in the water, the fishman leapt at the villagers, who were guarded by Nami, with his teeth glimmering in the light. The orange-haired navigator gulped fearfully as she saw her life flash before her eyes as she shut her eyes, expecting to feel the pain of shark teeth ripping into her flesh. However, when she felt nothing, and heard a collective gasp, she opened her eyes to see that Naruto had calmly gotten between her and Arlong and blocked his open jaws with a single finger, shutting his mouth. The fishman's teeth shattered from the impact, while the blonde looked boredly at the saw-nosed fishman. Your breath stinks, Minnow. Now go away, Naruto said levelly as he lightly backhanded Arlong in the chest, which would have been comical had Arlong not went flying back as if he'd been hit by a cannonball, skipping across the ground. Holy crap, why are you just standing over here if you could just toss him around like that? The villagers asked incredulously as Naruto sat down, yawning as he leaned against the threshold of the gate. Jin's sweat dropped beside him. Because it's not my fight, Naruto answered with shut eyes. My brother has something to prove, and I'm not going to get in his way. If I thought he couldn't handle it, I would step in. The blonde finished as the crowd watched Luffy as he clenched his fists tightly, the knuckles turning white. Reaching down into the rubble, he pulled two swords dropped by the knocked-out fishman from earlier. Zoro looked at his captain with a half-lidded eye as the rubber boy charged at Arlong, swiping at him with the swords with little to no style or form as Arlong dodged fluidly. Although he was still holding his chest gingerly. Finally, he grabbed one of the swords with his bare hands, catching the other between his newly regrown teeth as he destroyed it with his jaw strength. Pulling the still intact sword out of Luffy's hand as he crumpled the sword in his hand, throwing it away. "What were you trying to accomplish with that?" Arlong asked as he hit Luffy with a lunge that sent him through a column, leaving rubble littering the ground. "Prove a point," Luffy said as he rose, with blood dripping from his head from the impact. He grabbed a large stone as he led it tightly in his grip. "And what's that? That you have absolutely no hope of beating me?" Arlong taunted as Luffy growled, glaring the fishman down. "I cut myself with swords more than my opponents." Luffy growled, crushing the stone in his hand as he continued. "I can't even boil water without it catching fire," he said as he smashed a fist into the rest of the standing column, shattering it. Sanji puffed on his cigarette. "I can't navigate from one side of an island to the other." Luffy stomped his foot into the large piece of rubble, splitting it down the middle as Nami gasped. "And I certainly can't lie convincingly," Luffy shouted, as Usopp acted offended, although one could tell he wanted to see where his captain went with this speech. "On my own, I would have died a long time ago. But I can still do one thing," Luffy said softly as he smashed his fist into the ground as the remaining boulders were reduced to dust which covered the Strafoot captain. "Oh yeah, and what's that? Weak little human," Arlong taunted again, watching the dust cloud as he heard a loud cry. "I can protect my friends," Luffy shouted at the top of his lungs, sprinting out of the dust cloud as he smashed his fist into Arlong's face, knocking him back as his nose was horribly bent out of shape, but Luffy kept going as he then kicked Arlong into the side of his building, leaving a massive hole where Arlong went through the wall as he watched it closely as Arlong came out with a massive sword shaped like a saw blade. "As if something that weak could beat me. Why can't you just get it through your thick skull that you can't beat me?" Arlong snarled as he grit his teeth tightly, his pupils changing into dots as he saw red, charging blindly at Luffy, who yelped, before throwing a strong kick at Arlong which connected but didn't stop the charging fishman. Jumping over his wild swing, Luffy hammered a hard kick into the fishman's back that sent him stumbling forwards towards the water's edge. However, Luffy didn't let up as he threw his fist at Arlong, who spun around, sending Luffy flying like a shot into the roof of the building as Luffy's punch made Arlong spew blood from his mouth as he growled, using his considerable power as he leapt after Luffy, sending the fighting pair through a window as Nami watched them closely. "That room," she mumbled, "Unawa. That Naruto heard her as he didn't react other than a small smile. Little brother, you don't even know that the things you do make them want to charge into hell with you." Naruto whispered, his RDS lost under the loud gasp as a wooden desk was sent flying through the hole, smashing on the stones below. It was followed by a multitude of papers that fluttered down as tears sprung from Nami's eyes. Smiling demurely, Naruto opened his eyes in time to see the tower that punctuated Arlong Park split down the middle, the tower caving in on itself as it was transformed into a pile of rubble. "Luffy!" Nami shouted as Nami ran towards the rubble, Naruto chuckling at his brother's antics. Suddenly, a figure stood from the rubble, throwing its arms into the sky, and loudly proclaiming to the world, "Nami, you're ours." Luffy walked out of the rubble, dusting himself off as Nami ran towards him, followed closely by the rest of the village, who all loudly cheered for the Strafoots. Zoro acted aloof, which was surprisingly difficult when you have lost more than half the blood in your body, and were still bleeding everywhere. Sanji just began running towards Nami, loudly crying, "Nami-chan. You." Swap immediately began telling people that he would have beaten Arlong if Luffy was unable to, which made several bystanders laugh. Naruto looked at one of the only people not participating as he tightly clenched his fists. "Tell me, Jin, would you like to join them?" The blonde asked his newest crewmate who jumped, looking at him in surprise. "No, why?" he asked simply as Naruto smiled softly, rising from his spot on the ground. "It's okay if you do," he's my little brother, and I'm sure I can convince him. Just look at Nami, the whole time she tried to convince Luffy that she hated him and just wanted him to leave. But my brother still saw his friend in her. He didn't let anything stand in his way to save his friend. No matter the odds, he'll die before he lets one of his friends go. Naruto said, sticking his hands into the pockets of his pants as an annoying voice interrupted the festivities. Well, look what we have here. I knew if I waited long enough you would wear each other down. Now I can bring you all in and snag myself a nice promotion for it, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Nezumi said, backed by several rows of rank-and-file Marines. Nezumi, you haven't lifted a finger the entire you've been stationed near here except to extort more taxes from us, claiming it was for protection. Nojiko snarled as the crowd began to growl before a bullet between Nojiko's feet silenced them. Shut up, woman. We've done our duty, haven't we? So unless you want to go along with these pirates, then I'd suggest you keep your mouth shut. Nezumi hissed as Nojiko and Nami's hands twitched to their sides. Nojiko to her flintlock, Nami to her staff. Hold on, we haven't done anything this entire fight. Well, I haven't, and I want to see what my subordinates got, and I have this irritating twinge in my neck. Naruto said, Jin standing next to him with his tonfa in hand. Nami would mind terribly if I reclaim my cloak, I feel naked without it. The blonde requested as his brother's navigator nodded silently. Unclasping the cloak as she tossed it to him as he let it land on his back, snapping the clasp shut with a resounding snap. Who do you think you are that you can stand against this many Marines and come out of it alive? Nezumi asked, with a slight hint of fear. Naruto noticed. I am Naruto K. Uzumaki, and I don't appreciate you threatening my friends. Naruto said simply as his hair overshadowed his eyes as Nezumi stumbled back. So, could you kindly die? Naruto snarled as he looked at the Marines with a look of pure darkness with a foxish grin. You handle the rat, I'll get the others. Naruto said with steel in his voice as Jin nodded. NN Naruto Yu Uzumaki, the DDD demonic F fox. Nezumi said as Naruto chuckled darkly as he advanced, only to pause as he stepped on something that made a metallic noise. Looking down, he saw Arlong's saw-blade sword, which he picked up, swinging it around before smiling. Chanel will like this, he mumbled, would you mind if I take this? He asked aloud as the crowd shook their heads in the negative. Cool, he said. Pulling out his pair of butcher knives, he smiled at the 30 or so Marines. He see me. D to blur for a second as he landed in the center of them, dragging his blades down as blood shot into the sky, the Marines crying out as he turned on the ball of his foot, sending them all flying as he spun around. Multiple grooves cut into their skin. Carving festival, he snarled, licking his blades. Meanwhile, Jin leaned around Nezumi's shots before hitting the captain in the gut with the ball of his tonfa, causing the man to cough up blood. However, he was still a captain as he pushed through the pain, taking aim at Jin's head while he was close, but the former Krieg commander reacted quickly, leaning to the side as he took the bullet in the shoulder instead, causing him to drop one of his tonfa as he fell. You should have just stayed out of it. Maybe then you would have lived a little longer. Nezumi lorded over the downed fighter as he pushed himself up, throwing an admittedly weak punch at the captain, who leaned to the side as he let Jin stumble past him, cold-cocking him. How do you expect to fight me now without your balls? Nezumi said, and despite the situation, a few spectators chuckled, as Jin deadpanned. Their tonfa, he shouted, sweeping a foot under Nezumi, who was caught off guard as he fell forwards, only for Jin to hook his foot under his dropped tonfa, flipping it up as he caught it, then smashed it into Nezumi's back, making him fully flip over, but Jin wasn't done as he brought his remaining tonfa down, caving in Nezumi's chest as blood erupted like a fountain from the Marine captain's mouth. Wrecking ball barrage, Jin hissed out as he gave his tonfa a spin to show off. And I'm ambidextrous, you thieving prick, Jin added for good measure. The assembled crowd gave a loud cheer as they resumed their celebrations, carrying the Strafuts, as well. As Naruto and Jin back to Kokoyashi village. Later that night, Naruto could be found lying on the roof of a house, looking at the stars overhead. His top hat was set to the side as he lifted a finger, tracing lines between the glittering points that completed the blue canvas. Naruto, he heard someone say softly as he rolled over, glancing at the ground below. I'm up here, Nami. he responded as the orange-haired girl paused, looking up as he waved slowly at her. How'd you get up there? She asked as Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I have no idea, last thing I remember, we were being IED back to the village and then I found myself up here at night. He said nonchalantly as Nami's sweat dropped. You need a hand? The blonde asked as he held a hand down to the girl who jumped, grabbing in his hand as he pulled her up effortlessly. Maybe you had too much to drink, she suggested as Naruto shook his head. Doubtful, I'm not keen on alcohol, so I tend to not drink much. It can make having a celebration rather difficult, so I usually sneak off somewhere private to relax, he said, looking back at the sky as Nami sat down next to him, looking up with him. You never told me what my constellation, Nami pointed out as Naruto smiled softly. I still need to know what stars were lit up the night you were born, besides, I'm not even sure that it can be determined since our little island was special. All islands on the Grand Line are special in their own way, he answered softly, and it was silent between them for a little while before. I told you this dawn would be one of the most beautiful, didn't I? The blonde said as Nami nodded, which Naruto could see from the corner of his eye. Hey Naruto, Nami said quietly as the village started to settle down, the party dying down as the night went on. Yeah, Nami, he answered questioningly as he felt her press a hand to his chest, lifting herself up. Did you mean what you said, about there not being any price too high for me? The orange-haired navigator asked as Naruto smiled kindly as he looked into her eyes, blushing although she couldn't see it in the dark. Of course, you're more precious to me than any gold or silver. I've been alone for so long, and no money can fill that void, but when I'm with you, I don't even notice the ache in my chest, he said, his eyes widening as he felt Nami, softly pressing her lips to his. Nami, we can't do this after this, it's a straight shot to Reversal Mountain and after that I'll be back on my own ship. Naruto rambled as he tried to force the blood away from his cheeks. However, he felt a finger press against his lips. Shish, that's all right because for tonight, we can be alone together. Please, just for tonight, let me feel loved. Your brother will always be there to protect me, but tonight, I need you to love me. The girl whispered as she pressed her lips against his, before pulling away as she curled her arms around his neck, pulling herself close as she lay on his chest, and before long, her breathing leveled out. Naruto gulped as he pulled his cloak out from under him, tossing it over both of them as he wrapped her in his arms, softly brushing her hair with his hand as he looked into the stars, smiling as saw a familiar constellation twinkle. Gabriel the Purified, just like you mom, he said as single tear rolled down his cheek. The end. Thanks for watching.